I was reading this morning about Elizabeth Warren's new Social Security plan. She wants to basically give everybody on Social Security a $200 a week raise immediately, and extend that also to people on Social Security disability, and pay for it by eliminating the cap so that people see right now if somebody earns over roughly $30,000 a year, once they've made that much money, which for really rich people might be the first week of the year, they stop paying into the Social Security Trust Fund. They don't pay another penny. And so, you know, an average person might pay 6% of their income and their employer matches it with 6%. But a billionaire, they might pay, you know, 1/100% into it, you know, or a multimillionaire. So anyhow, raising the cap would do that. And it would lift 68% of the people who are in poverty, who are retired or disabled, out of poverty, and which is 5 million seniors. I mean, it's pretty mind-boggling when you think about it. So anyhow, as I'm reading the newspapers this morning, and nowhere did I see 5 million seniors, 68% lifted out of poverty. Instead, it was it was more frequently characterized as, oh my God, rich people are going to freak out. This kind of news coverage is insane. And you are so fortunate to have Free Speech TV here. This television network where you actually learn what's going on. You know, the flagship, of course, is Amy Goodman. And then there's a bunch of us who are commenting about the news as well and talking about it. And you won't find that anywhere else. And if you want to keep it, if you want Free Speech TV to stay on the air, literally, you need to call now, 877-378-8669. Please call now. Yesterday was just a terrible day. We raised very little money. We need to make that up. This you know, Free Speech TV needs to keep going. They need your help. And so 877-378-8669 is the telephone number. And you can also go to freespeech.org. Free Speech TV is such an essential part of our media landscape. And the other thing that I'm really seriously asking you to do, whether you can contribute or not, is to make it to set as a personal mission to tell a couple of people, even 2 or 3. You know, odds are maybe out of every 5 or 6 people who hear about Free Speech TV, one of them will actually look it up and then get addicted, or you know, find it useful. But I use that phrase, you know, lovingly. But you know, one of the most important things you can do is spread the word, right? We all need to become evangelists. So be an evangelist for Free Speech TV, whether you can make a contribution or not. This is the most important way that you can help out, in addition to calling right now and supporting this network at 877-378-8669. We have a set of gifts. These are all with one-time donations. If you make a $20 gift, you get a proud student of Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker. With a $50 gift, you get the Change the Channel Free Speech TV tote bag. With a $100 gift, you get the long sleeve shirt that says Any Functional Adult, which is kind of, you know, like we have a dysfunctional adult in the White House right now. And frankly, I would say most of the Republican Party, tragically, but in any case, Any Functional Adult long sleeve t-shirt. With a $150 gift, you get a copy of my new book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, and it'll be autographed. With a $250 gift, we're going to get together and do an online discussion, kind of an off-the-record meet and greet, as it were. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Portland here, hang out with us. You can sit in the studio for the last hour of the show, and then we'll go down the street here and have lunch at a nice nearby restaurant. So those are the premiums. But really, you know, I think most people take the premiums because, hey, you know, that's cool. It's nice to have goodies. But the main reason people donate is because to Free Speech TV, you know, whether it's a one-time gift or whether it's an ongoing and sustaining contribution or a one-year commitment or whatever it may be, is because of what Free Speech TV is offering. There's real content on this network. There's deep dive on this network. There's a perspective, a genuinely useful perspective, I think, on the news that is so lacking from the rest of the news coverage. I've been, as I said when I started, I'm reading this morning. I did about 3 hours of reading newspapers and whatnot before I came into the studio and we recorded this message to you today. And then, while I was doing that, I had the TV on, and almost universally the coverage was pablum. I mean, it was like, oh my God, are rich people going to be upset? Bloomberg says that, Elizabeth Warren wants to take billions away from the top 1%. Like, that's a bad thing? I mean, the top 1% have taken trillions of dollars out of the pockets of working people. Anyhow, 877-378-8669. Please call now. Thank you.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And greetings, my friends, my patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Been a while since I've said that. I just for old time's sake, it's Thursday. Tonight is the Democratic debates. And by the way, on our program in our second hour, Professor Richard Wolff will be here. But other than that, I have a giant stack of stuff to share with you. There is so much going on. It's going to take us 3 hours to fill it all. Our opening quote for the day, of course, his campaign manager is a felon, his deputy campaign manager is a felon, his personal lawyer is a felon, his foreign policy advisor is a felon, his national security advisor is a felon. The entire Trump campaign was run by criminals. I don't know how often we can repeat that, but anyhow, tonight is the Democratic debate. Biden, Booker, Buttigieg, Harris, O'Rourke, Sanders, and Warren and Yang, alphabetically, are going to be on the podium, although they will not be there alphabetically. They will be ranked basically from the center out based on polling numbers. So, excuse me, it's going to be interesting. My personal prediction for tonight, and by the way, if you want to watch it, it will be it's on ABC. So if you've got a local ABC TV affiliate, and most people do. Although not everybody these days in this era of smart televisions and cable TV and whatnot has an antenna on it. So if you're looking for streaming sources of it, abcnews.com will be streaming it. They also have an app. Hulu Live will be streaming it. If you have a Roku box, it will be streamed on the Roku channel. Facebook will be streaming it live. Apple TV will be streaming it live. Amazon Fire TV will be streaming it live. It'll be live on YouTube, Apple News, and it'll be live on Twitter. So there's no shortage of places where you'll be able to watch the debate tonight. And anyhow, my personal guess as to how it's going to play out is that we are not going to see, at least I hope not, we're not going to see the three frontrunners, which would be Biden, Warren, and Sanders, that you're not going to see them attacking each other. Although, who knows? Joe Biden, well, any of them, I suppose. Joe Biden is facing a lot of challenges. His performance on the CNN climate town hall raised a lot of questions for a lot of us about, how well his brain is working or ever worked. I mean, these were the same kind of questions that were raised back in the 80s and 90s when he ran for president. Although, well, we'll see. At the same time, Bernie has been slipping in the polls compared to Elizabeth Warren, who has been rising in the polls. So both, and Biden's been slipping in the polls. So both Biden and Sanders have an incentive anyway to attack Elizabeth Warren. I'm hoping they don't. I'm guessing they won't. Sanders and Warren are polling about 40% of the total Democratic vote right now, and they're both, the solid progressive candidates who are refusing to take corporate money. All of the other top-tier Democratic candidates are aggressively taking corporate money and billionaire money. And so, there is a kind of a clear delineation. But if there are attacks, and I'm guessing that they'll be directed at Elizabeth Warren more than anybody else, because she's so consistently, steadily, and kind of relentlessly rising in the polls. I'm guessing those attacks are going to come from the people who are polling under 8 or 9%. You know, we saw Kamala Harris get major benefit over the short term from her attack on Joe Biden in the first debate. And whether she's going to try that again, or whether it, Beto O'Rourke perhaps, I don't know. We'll see. I am hopeful that, Reagan's 11th commandment, thou shalt not speak ill of a fellow Republican, will prevail tonight in the debates. But who knows? Just in advance of the debates, Elizabeth Warren rolled out an extraordinary program, a very aggressive program, to expand Social Security. As you know, right now, if you earn $130,000 a year or less, 100% of your income you have to pay Social Security taxes on. Even your Social Security income, of all things. But I believe, I haven't gotten Social Security income up to this point, so I'm not sure, although I'm going to be getting it soon. But in any case, I know that you pay income tax on Social Security income. But setting that aside, for people under 65, 100% of your income you have to pay. If you're making $130,000 a year or less, you have to pay Social Security taxes on. And above that, you don't have to pay a penny on. So, right now the total is around 12%. It's a little over 12%. 12.4% is the total. Half of that is paid for by your employer. Half of that is paid for by you. So you're paying 6.2% tax into Social Security. And so we're paying basically a 12% tax on Social Security. So if you make under $130,000, you're paying 12% tax. But if you make $260,000, you're only paying a 6% tax. If you make $520,000, you're only paying a 3% tax. If you make $1 million a year, you're paying a 1.5% tax. If you make $10 million a year, you're paying a 0.15% tax. This quick back of the envelope doing it in my head math, but I think it's pretty close. And there's a lot of us for a long time who've been saying, that's crazy. Why should Charles Koch pay less income tax than I do, or Sean does, or Nate does, or anybody else? I mean, why is that? This doesn't make any sense. So, pay less than you do. So Elizabeth Warren is saying, let's do two things. Number one, let's raise that cap. Now, she's starting at $250,000. So people making between $130,000 and $250,000 still will no longer pay Social Security taxes in that range. But above $250,000, not only will you pay Social Security tax, but you'll pay it at 14% rather than 12%. It's actually 14 and change. It's 14.8% instead of 12.4%. If you're making more than $250,000 a year, and what's she going to do with that money? She's going to give everybody on Social Security an immediate $200 a month raise, average of $200 a month, and this is, by the way, going to reduce the federal budget deficit by $1 trillion over the next decade. And it will make Social Security viable forever. And perhaps most importantly, and these are the statistics that I did not learn until I got an email from the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, Adam Green and Stephanie Taylor, the bold progressives. I didn't see it in the Washington Post piece. I didn't see it in the New York Times piece. Maybe it's in some of these pieces, but basically, immediately, as soon as if Elizabeth Warren's plan is put into law, and Bernie has a similar plan, by the way, and has campaigned on it for years and years. If this plan is put into law, immediately almost 5 million seniors get lifted out of poverty, which would cut the senior poverty rate by 68%. In addition to reducing our budget deficit by over $1 trillion over the next decade, as I pointed out, which is, a good thing. It's definitely not a bad thing. So this is and Elizabeth Warren also wants people who earn their, in quotes, earn their income by sitting on their butts around the pool waiting for the dividend check to arrive. the Paris Hiltons of the world, the trust fund babies. They make their money by investing money. Elizabeth Warren wants them to start paying taxes on that investment money. Right now they pay an income tax on it, although it's a much, much lower rate than you and I pay as working people. They only, this capital gains tax, they pay a much lower rate. But there's no Social Security tax for people like, the billionaires who live on their investments. They pay no Social Security tax at all. So she wants to start applying that to that kind of income, which I think is a good thing. I think it's a very good thing. Additionally, the second question, as it were, second issue is, what would you like to see in tonight's debates? And we'll get into that in more detail in the next hour. But I think that this is, this is frankly, I think, a very, very big issue. Stuart Varney, Fox's Stuart Varney, has warned Elizabeth Warren about, you're going to go after rich people? Really? I mean, he's quite upset about this, apparently. And, but here's the simple reality. The bottom 80% of Americans, at the time that, Reagan started his policies, the bottom 80% of Americans owned a little over 20% of all the wealth in America. Now it's about 12%. The top 1% of Americans, when Reagan's policy started, owned about 22% of America's wealth. Now it's about 40%. That should tell you everything you need to know. The headline over at Bloomberg is titled, "Richest Could Lose Hundreds of Billions of Dollars Under Warren's Wealth Tax." How about hundreds of billions of dollars would strengthen the American economy? How about, it's, and by the way, their article then goes into this, the new Thomas Piketty, who came out with Capital in the 21st Century some years ago that sold millions of copies. The French edition of Capital and Ideology. This is his sequel, 1,200 pages. It comes out today in French. But anyhow, he says the time has come to exit this phase of making property sacred, to go beyond capitalism. He argues that no shareholder should be able to have more than 10% voting rights, even if, like Mark Zuckerberg, they own the majority of the stock or a large chunk of the stock. His inheritance for all would grant all French citizens a lump sum of $132,000 when they reach the age of 25. And he basically wants to have a wealth tax that starts at 0.1% when you have wealth of 200,000 euros, about $220,000, but goes up to 90% on billionaires. What do you think of that? I mean, a lot going on here. Your thoughts on the debate tonight? Your thoughts on Social Security and whether Elizabeth Warren's plan is going to fly or whether this is another thing that will get her labeled a socialist? I got a pile of other news, too. The impeachment hearing started.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And I'll get to that and a bunch of other things in just a moment. It's 18 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. Wendell in New Kennington, Pennsylvania. Am I saying that right, Wendell?
Yes.
Hey, you're on the air. What's up?
Yeah, about that North Carolina situation where they got a Democratic governor, and then the Republicans couldn't pass another tax cut they wanted to pass because they got more Democrats in there than they
It wasn't just a tax cut. It also would have prevented, I think it's about a little over 400,000 North Carolinians from getting Medicaid expansion.
Yeah. Why did the Democrats leave and give them a chance to get for the
Democrats left
and play?
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Finish your question. I'll give you the details.
And the Democrats got played like they always do. You don't trust the Republicans.
Yeah. Well, and that's the problem. I mean, this, if you can't win, cheat, seems to be the mantra. What happened was Representative David Lewis, who is a Republican from Harnett County, North Carolina, told the Democratic leader, Darren Jackson of Wake County, that there would be no recorded votes on the morning of 9/11 because a bunch of Democrats wanted to go to a 9/11 memorial. And so here you have the Republican leadership telling the Democratic leadership in the North Carolina House of Representatives that there will be no votes. We promise you, not to worry. And then as soon as the Democrats left the room, all but 9 of them, there were 9 Democrats there, there are 55 Republicans. As soon as the Democrats left to go to this 9/11 memorial, Representative Jason Saine, who was representative from Lincolnton, North Carolina, made a motion to basically override the veto, and it passed 55-9. You have to have a simple majority to have a quorum in the North Carolina House, and then whatever the vote is, it's based on the majority vote. So, and now it goes to the Senate, and in the Senate, it requires a 75% majority in order to override a veto. But the Republicans control the majority of the seats in the Senate. Let me get the details on this. Yeah, Republicans have a 29-21 majority in the Senate. They would need 30. They would need one more vote one Democrat in order to override this veto. They actually got one Democrat to vote with them last year on an abortion bill, or actually to override Cooper's veto of abortion legislation. And so the question is, in the North Carolina Senate now, the Republicans can do it one of 2 ways. They can either have a vote and try to pry away a Democrat, or they can wait for another, kind of 9/11 kind of event. That is, another thing where a Democrat doesn't show up, or just wait for one Democrat to be sick and then have the vote.
Then why do they trust them? They know that this is the way they play their hand. They should have all just stayed there and waited because they knew this was coming. And you know what the problem is that the Democrats, they always come to a gunfight with a knife.
I think the problem is that we tend to judge other people by ourselves. This was probably the most important lesson my dad ever taught me, that people judge others by what they would do themselves. And the Democrats are basically trustworthy, and so they were willing to take a Republican's word on its face. And the Republicans are not trustworthy. They're lying scum, apparently, in North Carolina, and increasingly all across the country. So, you're right, the Democrats should have seen it coming on the one hand. On the other hand, what? Yeah, I guess that's the bottom line. Wendell, thanks for the call. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Yeah, Stuart Varney blasts Elizabeth Warren for sharing profits. This is Stuart Varney on Fox and Friends this morning. He said, "This is the socialist takeover of American business." Jim Cramer freaked out. This is on CNBC. He says, "She needs to be stopped." Now, both of these guys are multimillionaires, right? And they're probably both pulling at least $1 million salary for what they do. Typically, if you see somebody on commercial television, their starting salaries run around $1 million a year and go up from there. Fox business reporter Charles Gasparino wrote an article for the New York Post, which Fox and Friends cited in advance of the Varney segment, saying basically the same thing. Colby Halsep wrote a great piece about this over at Mediaite. And Varney said, under Warren's plans, now this is not a quote, this is just a paraphrase. Under Warren's plans, profits would no longer go to shareholders. It would drive down stock prices and cut the value of retirement accounts. Right. Well, if the stock market goes down, I think the average person is perfectly capable of bailing their 401k out of the stock market. Although, none of us want to see another crash. I think that that's going to be inevitable given, what the Republicans are up to. And I got to tell you, at some point today or soon, about what the CFTC is doing. Well, actually, I'll tell you right now. This is Sunday is the anniversary of the collapse of Lehman Brothers. It collapsed in 2008, and it led to the entire collapse of the entire financial system. Not because Lehman Brothers was so critical, but because the entire system was basically a house of cards. And here's what's amazing. The CFTC is meeting on Monday, the day after the anniversary of the collapse of Lehman Brothers, to finalize a revision to the Volcker Rule, basically saying that once again banks can start gambling with their own money. And I mean, the banks have been lobbying for this forever. So this is seriously dangerous stuff. The House Judiciary Committee approved a resolution on guidelines for impeachment this morning. This is a big deal. If they say explicitly, we are conducting an impeachment inquiry, which is basically what they said this morning, then they acquire Article 3 powers. That is, they become, which is the judiciary. They acquire basically the powers of a federal grand jury. They can compel witnesses to testify. They can force the release of documents. The Supreme Court backed up Congress on this in Nixon U.S. v. Nixon. Back in 1974, when Richard Nixon said, I don't have to turn over the tapes, the Supreme Court said, yes, you do. And he did. Now, whether Trump will comply with a Supreme Court ruling is a damn good question. But this is what's going on. And the Judiciary Committee, God bless them, Jerry Nadler is starting to really behave seriously on this. And they also, over the objections of the Republicans, this was all absolute party line vote, over the objection of the Republicans, they also decided to change the rules so that their lawyers can interrogate witnesses for a full 30 minutes instead of giving Republicans 5 minutes every other question. That's great.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
The Trump administration is ripping apart families fleeing from the Bahamas. This is bizarre. And we figured out who's running those stingrays in D.C. More news coming up. I was reading this morning about Elizabeth Warren's new Social Security plan. She wants to basically give everybody on Social Security a $200 a week raise immediately, and extend that also to people on Social Security disability, and pay for it by eliminating the cap so that people see right now, if somebody earns over roughly $30,000 a year, once they've made that much money, which for really rich people might be the first week of the year, they stop paying into the Social Security Trust Fund. They don't pay another penny. And so, an average person might pay 6% of their income and their employer matches it with 6%. But a billionaire, they might pay, 1/100% into it, or a multimillionaire. So anyhow, raising the cap would do that. And it would lift 68% of the people who are in poverty, who are retired or disabled, out of poverty, and which is 5 million seniors. I mean, it's pretty mind-boggling when you think about it. So anyhow, I'm reading the newspapers this morning, and nowhere did I see 5 million seniors, 68% lifted out of poverty. Instead, it was it was more frequently characterized as, oh my God, rich people are going to freak out. This kind of news coverage is insane. And you are so fortunate to have Free Speech TV here. This television network where you actually learn what's going on. The flagship, of course, is Amy Goodman. And then there's a bunch of us who are commenting about the news as well and talking about it. And you won't find that anywhere else. And if you want to keep it, If you want Free Speech TV to stay on the air, literally, you need to call now, 877-378-8669. Please call now. Yesterday was just a terrible day. We raised very little money. We need to make that up. Free Speech TV needs to keep going. They need your help. And so 877-378-8669 is the telephone number. And you can also go to freespeech.org. Free Speech TV is such an essential part of our media landscape. And the other thing that I'm really seriously asking you to do, whether you can contribute or not, is to make it to set as a personal mission to tell a couple of people, even 2 or 3. Odds are maybe out of every 5 or 6 people who hear about Free Speech TV, one of them will actually look it up and then get addicted, or find it useful. But I use that phrase, lovingly. But one of the most important things you can do is spread the word, right? We all need to become evangelists. So be an evangelist for Free Speech TV, whether you can make a contribution or not. This is the most important way that you can help out, in addition to calling right now and supporting this network at 877-378-8669. We have a set of gifts. These are all with one-time donations. If you make a $20 gift, you get a proud student of Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker. With a $50 gift, you get the Change the Channel Free Speech TV tote bag. With a $100 gift, you get the long sleeve shirt that says Any Functional Adult, which is kind of, like we have a dysfunctional adult in the White House right now. And frankly, I would say most of the Republican Party, tragically, but in any case, Any Functional Adult long sleeve t-shirt. With a $150 gift, you get a copy of my new book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, and it'll be autographed. With a $250 gift, we're going to get together and do an online discussion, kind of an off-the-record meet and greet, as it were. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Portland here, hang out with us. You can sit in the studio for the last hour of the show, and then we'll go down the street here and have lunch at a nice nearby restaurant. So those are the premiums. But really, I think most people take the premiums because, hey, that's cool. It's nice to have goodies. But the main reason people donate is because to Free Speech TV, whether it's a one-time gift or whether it's an ongoing and sustaining contribution or a one-year commitment or whatever it may be, is because of what Free Speech TV is offering. There's real content on this network. There's deep dive on this network. There's a perspective, a genuinely useful perspective, I think, on the news that is so lacking from the rest of the news coverage. I've been, as I said when I started, I'm reading this morning. I did about 3 hours of reading newspapers and whatnot before I came into the studio and we recorded this message to you today. And then, while I was doing that, I had the TV on, and almost universally the coverage was pablum. I mean, it was like, oh my God, are rich people going to be upset? Bloomberg says that, Elizabeth Warren wants to take billions away from the top 1%. Like, that's a bad thing? I mean, the top 1% have taken trillions of dollars out of the pockets of working people. Anyhow, 877-378-8669. Please call now. Thank you. Want to have some nice cancer-causing chemicals in your water? The Trump administration is, here's the headlines from today's New York Times. Administration to finalize rollback of clean water protections. Yeah, you don't need clean water. What's a little lead, a little strontium, a little arsenic? I mean, industry needs to pollute that water, right? It's more profitable for them than paying to dispose of those awful chemicals. This is pretty damn breathtaking. Meanwhile, I just got this email, literally just got this email during the break from Trump-Pence 2020. Dear Fred, we can't wait for tonight. The top 10 corrupt liberals will take the stage at 8 p.m. tonight and debate which of their plans would ruin our country the most. Here's the list of the top things we expect to hear from Democrats debate tonight. And there's a bullet point list here. Banning plastic straws, destroying all fossil fuels, banning fracking everywhere, raising your taxes to pay for illegal criminals, no more offshore drilling, taking jobs away from tens of thousands of people, light bulb ban, and no more cheeseburgers. We wish we were joking, but these are the liberals' top 10 candidates for President of the United States. Before these wacky candidates start arguing about who's worse for America, President Trump needs to get your critical input on a few important matters and has asked to see all responses submitted before the Dem debate tonight. Yes, he's going to read your personal email. See, even the people who write his fundraisers lie. Please take our official 2020 Trump versus Democrat poll before 8 p.m. tonight to let the president know where you stand. Then when you click on it, it takes you to kind of a flimsy poll question. You answer a question and boom, they ask you for money. But, there we go. Plastic straws. Give me a break. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is now, this from the Daily Beast, Trump flirts with $15 billion bailout for Iran, according to sources. I think Trump is realizing that he stepped in it when he blew up the Iran deal. And I think that what brought that to a head was John Bolton trying to use the failure of the Iran deal, or Trump with, pulling us out of the Iran deal, as an excuse to get us into a war with Iran. So, anyhow, a lot going on. Picking up your phone calls. Dale in Harmony, North Carolina. Hey, Dale, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I'm from the corrupt state of Harmony, North Carolina.
Cool.
And what we've got out here is not only just our legislature and all is corrupt, the agriculture department is corrupt too, because we got so much cover-up going on, and they refuse to educate the farmers on what's going on about the health of their animals there, because of the sulfuric acid contamination that's in the feed and everything, wet milling industry.
How does sulfuric acid get in animal feed?
That's the way they break down the starch in there in that wet milling process. It's done in the human process too. Mm-hmm. That's the way they make high fructose corn syrup. Huh. Break down the starch and the corn, separate the different ingredients.
Yeah, I remember something about that. Yeah, because high fructose corn syrup is made basically in a lab. It's not a naturally occurring thing. Huh.
Yeah, it's a chemical process to make starch turn to sugar.
Right.
And those byproducts are going into all kinds of animal feed, your pet feed and everything there, and it's causing neurological nerve damage. Huh. And it's the same thing with the humans there. If a pregnant mother, animal or human, eats that stuff, it damages that unborn fetus more, I'm going to say 100 times more than it does the adult person, because it damages soft tissue first.
Right.
That's what's causing all this B vitamin deficiency, polio, and stuff like the affected leishmaniasis. I haven't added. It's a real big factor in on that. It causes white muscle disease, MS, all that kind of stuff right there. And
so you're seeing these diseases in animals, and the state of North Carolina's ag department that should be providing farmers with good information about how to avoid these problems is not doing it? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they've refused the educational program that I've been asked for years, because there's none of the doctors that want to get up truth on this, because those doctors know that we have uncovered the truth on it, and they basically quit having meetings there. Huh. Plus, poison to food-producing animals is classified after 9/11 as a terrorist attack. And look, we've been asking for an FBI investigation into this, but, the agriculture department, they block that because there's some kind of a law in there that says that the FBI don't investigate nothing in agriculture without agriculture.
Right. Well, it would have to be interstate commerce. Dale, that's fascinating. Thanks a lot for the call. I'll have to look into this. Judy in Duncan, Oklahoma. Hey, Judy, what's on your mind today?
Well, I think you just submitted my vote for Elizabeth Warren. I'm thrilled that she wants to raise the cap on Social Security deductions. Why don't we take it all off? not have a cap, and then we could reduce the percentage that everybody has to pay.
I agree. Although that 130,000 to 250,000, I believe that's being untouched right now by politicians on the Democratic side. I mean, the Republicans, they just want to keep the cap where it is. But I think that the reason the Democrats are hanging on to that is they don't want to lose the suburban upper middle class white vote, basically. And so they don't want to be perceived as the ones who are raising taxes on. I mean, most people pay taxes as a family, and you get a couple of people who are both making a couple of lawyers, or a lawyer and a doctor, or somebody who works in investment banking or whatever. The not the ownership class, not the millionaires and billionaires, but it's like the top 5%. They're maybe even the top 10 or 15%. In that income category, it's skewing heavily Democratic right now, and they don't want to raise taxes on those folks. But your point is well taken, Judy, and I completely agree. And of course, the Republicans are going to characterize this, and perhaps accurately, as the camel's nose under the tent. That this is the beginning of it. But yeah, I think what Elizabeth Warren is proposing is strong stuff, and I think it's a really good thing. Judy, thank you for the call. Nancy in Oregon, Illinois. Hey, Nancy, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. It's basically on that same subject. The person you talked about at Fox that was all upset because
Stuart Varney.
God, we're gonna tax the wealthy and all that takes money away from the wealthy. And Trump has been taking food stamps and away from the poor for a long time, making them more and more poor. Everybody's been doing that. Yep. And where's his outrage about that? Is it only the wealthy that matter? Do they need more and more money, and everybody else needs to go hungry? Yeah,
it's pretty mind-boggling, Nancy. It really and truly is. And yes, the simple answer. Stuart Varney basically was saying, "Oh my God, this is the end of capitalism." Capitalism was doing just fine up until 1967, when the top tax rate was 91%. Capitalism did just fine from 1967 until 1983, when the top tax rate was 74%. What we've had since Reagan dropped the top tax rate from 74%, which LBJ had dropped it to, from 74% down to 25%. Now it's floated back up a little bit since then. It's around 32%, I think, right now. But what capitalism has been doing since that top tax rate of 74% dropped through the 50% threshold, which is the threshold necessary to maintain a middle class, is that the middle class has been collapsing. And, and capitalism was doing fine in the 1950s. In fact, it was doing better than it is now. It was doing fine in the 1960s. In fact, it was doing better than it is now. It was doing fine in the 1970s, better than it is now, at least for the middle class. But it was doing fine for rich people, too, back then. But now all of the gains are going to the top 1%. The top 1/10 of 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 80% in America right now. And Elizabeth Warren has come along and saying there's something, it's time to do something about this. Bernie Sanders, by the way, is also saying it's time to do something about this.
Yeah, what we need is socialism, which is for the people. That's for the people. And that's what we need.
If you call it democratic socialism, Nancy, I completely agree with you. Although I guarantee you the Democrats are going to run away from that word, and the Republicans are going to constantly use that word. And that's going to be probably the main pivot point for the election of 2020.
I call it social capitalism, where the owners are the workers. Yeah. That would be the best kind of capitalism I could think of. Yeah,
social capitalism. I like that. Nancy, thank you. Deborah in Denver, Colorado. Hey, Deborah, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thank you for all you do. We greatly appreciate you. I have just a couple of thoughts I want to get out there, and so I don't lose my train of thought. Mm-hmm. First, I just want to respond to Bill Maher's show. He mentioned that he he doesn't like the Democrats have spineless people in office.
Well, on the other hand, this morning on Joe Scarborough's show on Morning Joe, he was saying that Elizabeth Warren scared him, and that if she becomes the nominee, that Donald Trump gets reelected. which I don't believe for a second. But that seems
I
to
don't
be,
believe that either.
This is the message that is being spread far and wide, and particularly in high-end Hollywood fundraising circles by not just Joe Biden, by several of the, actually the only two Democratic candidates who are refusing to take money from very, very rich people and from corporations are Sanders and Warren. And so,
that's fine.
Yeah, but the other
Yeah,
candidates are
fine.
trashing them for it and saying, "Oh my God,
Right.
look out! They're socialists."
And he brought Delaney on his show and completely lied and said that getting away from the middle is going to cost us. And then he mentioned Al Gore. Well, Al Gore actually won. And he mentioned Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was not for reaching the middle.
Yeah.
And
Deborah,
let me just get back to my
I don't
thought.
think Bill Maher lied. I think he is telling what he
Not Bill
believes
Maher,
to
I
be
said
true.
Delaney.
Oh, Delaney. Yeah,
Delaney. I mentioned Delaney.
Yeah.
He mentioned that going to the middle is what cost the Democrats, and that's just not true. I think that what cost the Democrats is when the Clintons brought it to the middle, because then we lost all the working people.
Yeah.
Let me just finish out my thought. I just want to say that with Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, their polls together beat anybody. And I just hope that if Elizabeth wins or Bernie wins, that they don't make the same mistake that Hillary did, and that is to exclude Bernie, because if she would have kept him, she would have won.
Yeah.
The second thing I want to say briefly is that there is nothing more impossible and more radical and something that could have scared the public is when John F. Kennedy said, "We're going to the moon, and you have to get it done by such and such date."
Right, within 10 years. Within a decade is what he said.
Years.
Yeah.
There's nothing more impossible than that. So why can't they accept the fact that the country needs change, and why are they so afraid of it? We have to, because first of all, Biden, he's only going to win the states. He's going to win the states that are going to vote Republican anyway. Mm-hmm. So you really can't count that. And that's what Hillary made her mistake, is she won all of the states that weren't going to vote Democrat anyway. Mm. So I think that by them saying that Biden is the best choice, well, to me, he hasn't really said anything of how he's going to fix anything, and I just don't see any change with him. The country is broken. The biblical reference for a house divided against itself will not stand.
Right.
And Jesus Christ himself said this. We're so polarized. If we have Biden come in, nothing will get changed. Nothing will get fixed.
Well, my concern, I think that the times have changed, and I'm guessing that, if Joe Biden is elected, that he's going to adopt somewhat more progressive positions. My concern is that, young people, progressives, progressive boomers, the Gen X and Y and, ERS who have huge amounts of student debt, they're not going to show up to vote if Joe Biden is the nominee. I mean, he was the author of the bankruptcy bill that put them in that student debt. That's my concern. On the other hand, if he becomes this party's nominee, I'm going to do everything I can to get him elected. I think we all need to. But I'm just very, very concerned that he will not energize the base the way that Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders would. Deborah, thank you for the call. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's 48 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls and more of the news of the day right after this. And welcome back. Steve in Yorba Linda, listening on KPFK. Hey, Steve, what's up?
Hey, thank you, Tom, for taking my phone call. I've been listening to your program a long time, and I love it.
Thank you.
I have just a couple of things. I guess one is you're talking about the economy, and I just took a look, and since about 2009, it looks like the S&P 500 has been growing roughly 11% per year. It hasn't had it's had a couple of down things in there. But prior to that, I think the rate of the S&P 500 change per year was closer to maybe 8 or 8.5%.
I doubt that because it doubled. It more than doubled from 2008 till the end of the Obama administration.
Yeah.
You don't get a doubling of anything at 8% a year over 8 years. I don't think.
That would have been around, I don't know. Anyway, ever since around 2009 to
but what's your point,
about
Steve?
1,000 to 3,000. My point is, it's not a bad investment, but you don't want to put all your money in there because every 4 to 7 years it has a downdraft and then comes back up again.
Well, yes and no. I mean, if you're in your 30s, 20s, 30s, 40s, even maybe even your early 50s. I would say, putting money in the stock market's a really good deal. It's a really good investment, regardless of where the market is and regardless of where you are in the cycle. Eventually, you're going to make it up. On the other hand, if you're in your 60s right now, it's probably a really good time to get out of the market, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, certainly not have most of your assets in there. And I guess as a follow-on, I'd say, a couple of different things about the politics we're in right now. Probably candidates shouldn't be using that S word as in socialism. They shouldn't be using the P word as in progressive because that scares a whole bunch of Republicans that might be moderates out there.
Yeah. And I'm not so concerned about the progressive word. I mean, that you even have an insurance company that calls itself that. It's not that hasn't been quite as demonized. But socialist, yes. And the main reason why is because for anybody over 50, basically the word socialist evokes the images of the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, rather than Eugene Debs. And people just don't understand the history of it. And I get it that Bernie's always called himself a democratic socialist. I'm guessing that if Bernie, when he was 18 years old, started talking like this, knew that someday he'd run for president, he might have changed his language slightly, but who knows? I mean, he has kind of single-handedly rehabilitated that word. Although he's always been careful to say. I mean, he was on the show every week, every Friday for 11 years. He was always careful to say that he was a democratic socialist, not a socialist. And so,
Yeah, the one thing I would put in here that we might think about, whether we call ourselves progressives or liberals or whatever, is to start talking about what I call responsible capitalism.
Yes.
Responsible, because the Republicans and conservatives love that word responsible. And
You're absolutely right.
It's a good word.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's what we need to be thinking about, talking about with respect to capitalism.
Well, that's in essence how Elizabeth Warren is defining all this. I mean, she calls herself a capitalist. And, frankly, I don't think she's a capitalist. I think she believes in capitalism. But, she's using the popular language, and she's calling herself a capitalist and saying that she wants responsible capitalism. She wants capitalism that works for everybody, not just for the top 1%. So I think that she's going down the road that you're talking about. And Bernie does to a large extent. It's just that socialist label keeps following him around like, toilet paper on his shoe. Steve, thanks for the call. We'll be back. I got to run here. We'll be right back. Welcome back. 53 minutes past the hour. Pam in Chicago, listening to WCPT. Hey, Pam, what's up?
Hi, Tom. How are you?
I am great, but I'll get better, Pam, especially after the debates. Hopefully after the debates tonight.
Yes, Tom.
What's on your mind?
We're in these debates. We certainly can't get the information that we need because we know the questions that we want to hear, your audience wants to hear, probably won't be addressed. But, Tom, it's time for us to go left. And maybe that should be part of the Democratic. It's time to go left. What a novel idea that we can have a president who doesn't take money or isn't obligated to the corporate structure.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be wonderful? I just wanted to ask Tom, what is the best way for to get the message out, the Democratic Party, particularly Bernie as well as Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, all of them who want to go maybe left, but the regular, media won't really cover or will distort their messages.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the best way for them to get their message out to those who still watch the regular network TV news?
The way to do it is to talk about the specific issues, but talk about them using the language of values. In other words, say, yes, I'm in favor of Medicare for all. That's the policy. because because healthcare should be a human right in the United States like it is in every other developed country. That's the value, right? Yes, I'm in favor of everybody being able to vote and opposed to the voting suppression efforts of the Republican Party. That's the policy, because voting should be a sacred right in a democracy. It's the core of a democracy. That's the value. I'm in favor of the banks being aggressively regulated and big corporations being aggressively regulated. That's the policy, because capitalism really should work for everybody. It should work for working people as much as it works for the wealthy people. That's the value. Am I making sense here, Pam?
I wish they would say that, Tom. I really do, because everybody is not envious of wealthy people. Some people just want to have a car or home and send their children to school and get a decent education.
You're absolutely right, Pam.
I wish they would push that message. Here in Illinois, we thought our Senate seats were safe, but I know I don't have time to go into detail. I'm a little bit concerned, Tom, about Senator Durbin's seat. And I'm seeing some things going on politically. Yes.
Dick Durbin is really popular. What you see a Republican offering a serious challenge?
Well, I think there could be a split, because there is a candidate now coming into the race who garners a lot of goodwill and actually votes among the black community, Tom.
On the Republican side or in a primary?
Well, here's in a primary, and he perhaps will be running as an independent Democrat.
Oh, my.
And he may go independent. He has a lot of money.
Who is this?
So I'm just concerned about a split vote.
Right.
And Durbin has some work to do in the black community. Don't get me wrong. So I'm not saying that he's been all great.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that, the Democratic Party needs to be careful about that.
Who is that candidate you're concerned about, Pam?
Reverend Willie Wilson.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
He's a wealthy businessman, and trust me, Tom, he's been on the forefront of some issues, really important issues to the black community. So I don't want to disparage him. However, he did vote for Trump. That's problematic for me.
Whoa, yeah, that's problematic. Period. Pam, thanks. I didn't know about that. Of course, I don't live in Illinois, so I'm not as tuned into your politics as you are. But thank you very much, and for the heads up on that. It's fascinating stuff. Anyhow, we'll continue our conversation right after, in our next hour. So, plus Richard Wolff will be with us in the next hour. So stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. I was reading this morning about Elizabeth Warren's new Social Security plan. She wants to basically give everybody on Social Security a $200 a week raise immediately, and extend that also to people on Social Security disability, and pay for it by eliminating the cap so that people see right now if somebody earns over roughly $30,000 a year, once they've made that much money, which for really rich people might be the first week of the year, they stop paying into the Social Security Trust Fund. They don't pay another penny. And so, you know, an average person might pay 6% of their income and their employer matches it with 6%. But a billionaire, they might pay, you know, 1/100% into it, you know, or a multimillionaire. So anyhow, raising the cap would do that. And it would lift 68% of the people who are in poverty, who are retired or disabled, out of poverty, and which is 5 million seniors. I mean, it's pretty mind-boggling when you think about it. So anyhow, I'm reading the newspapers this morning, and nowhere did I see 5 million seniors, 68% lifted out of poverty. Instead, it was it was more frequently characterized as, oh my God, rich people are going to freak out. This kind of news coverage is insane. And you are so fortunate to have Free Speech TV here. This television network where you actually learn what's going on. You know, the flagship, of course, is Amy Goodman. And then there's a bunch of us who are commenting about the news as well and talking about it. And you won't find that anywhere else. And if you want to keep it, if you want Free Speech TV to stay on the air, literally, you need to call now, 877-378-8669. Please call now. Yesterday was just a terrible day. We raised very little money. We need to make that up. This you know, Free Speech TV needs to keep going. They need your help. And so 877-378-8669 is the telephone number. And you can also go to freespeech.org. Free Speech TV is such an essential part of our media landscape. And the other thing that I'm really seriously asking you to do, whether you can contribute or not, is to make it to set as a personal mission to tell a couple of people, even 2 or 3. You know, odds are maybe out of every 5 or 6 people who hear about Free Speech TV, one of them will actually look it up and then get addicted, or you know, find it useful. But I use that phrase, you know, lovingly. But you know, one of the most important things you can do is spread the word, right? We all need to become evangelists. So be an evangelist for Free Speech TV, whether you can make a contribution or not. This is the most important way that you can help out, in addition to calling right now and supporting this network at 877-378-8669. We have a set of gifts. These are all with one-time donations. If you make a $20 gift, you get a proud student of Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker. With a $50 gift, you get the Change the Channel Free Speech TV tote bag. With a $100 gift, you get the long sleeve shirt that says Any Functional Adult, which is kind of, you know, like we have a dysfunctional adult in the White House right now. And frankly, I would say most of the Republican Party, tragically, but in any case, Any Functional Adult long sleeve t-shirt. With a $150 gift, you get a copy of my new book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, and it'll be autographed. With a $250 gift, we're going to get together and do an online discussion, kind of an off-the-record meet and greet, as it were. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Portland here, hang out with us. You can sit in the studio for the last hour of the show, and then we'll go down the street here and have lunch at a nice nearby restaurant. So those are the premiums. But really, you know, I think most people take the premiums because, hey, you know, that's cool. It's nice to have goodies. But the main reason people donate is because to Free Speech TV, you know, whether it's a one-time gift or whether it's an ongoing and sustaining contribution or a one-year commitment or whatever it may be, is because of what Free Speech TV is offering. There's real content on this network. There's deep dive on this network. There's a perspective, a genuinely useful perspective, I think, on the news that is so lacking from the rest of the news coverage. I've been, as I said when I started, I'm reading this morning. I did about 3 hours of reading newspapers and whatnot before I came into the studio and we recorded this message to you today. And then, while I was doing that, I had the TV on, and almost universally the coverage was pablum. I mean, it was like, oh my God, are rich people going to be upset? Bloomberg says that, Elizabeth Warren wants to take billions away from the top 1%. Like, that's a bad thing? I mean, the top 1% have taken trillions of dollars out of the pockets of working people. Anyhow, 877-378-8669. Please call now. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. We've been talking about Elizabeth Warren's new plan for Social Security and wealth taxes, and the Republicans freaking out about this, and what's going to happen on the debates tonight, and how you can watch them, and all that kind of stuff. We'll get back to those conversations and the rest of the 2-inch thick stack of news that I've got to get to today. But first, I wanted to check in with Professor Richard Wolff. He is the economist, the co-founder of democracyatwork.info, the author most recently of Understanding Marxism. His democracyatwork.info website is there, as well as rdwolff with 2 Fs.com, his more personal website. You can tweet him at Prof Wolff, PROFWOLFF. Dr. Wolff, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Tom. Glad to be here.
It is always so great to have you. So I read in the Financial Times that China is lowering the reserve requirement for their banks. And I believe that I've heard that the Trump administration is also trying to roll back reserve requirements on banks. And then on top of that, yesterday I was reading, I think it was in the Financial Times, how they want to radically roll back the little tiny reserve requirements that Fannie and Freddie have. Apparently Fannie and Freddie are sitting on something like $6 billion to secure $1 trillion worth of mortgages, some mind-boggling amounts of numbers. I don't think most Americans even know what a reserve requirement is or what this means. And you're so good at translating this econ speak into English. Could you tell us what's going on here and how it ties into the crash of 2008?
Will do. Okay, let's begin with what banks basically do. We, the people and businesses, put money into the bank for safekeeping, for record keeping, and all the rest to make our payments. Normally, the banks give us little or nothing for doing so, but then they take the money we deposit and lend it out. To take the most extreme example, we these days put money into a bank, get literally 0.5%, 1%, and the bank turns around and lends that money out to people who use credit cards, charging them in the neighborhood of 16, 17, 18 or more percent. In short, how banks make a big part of their money is by getting us to give them deposits on which they pay a little and then turning around and lending that money out at interest rates that earn them a lot with our money. And the problem has been that banks, who love this arrangement for reasons that should be obvious, have a tendency to lend out pretty nearly every nickel we give them, because obviously the more of our money they lend out, the fatter the profit they take home. The big problem here is, if for any reason a large number of us want our deposits back, which after all they're ours and we have every right to them, the bank would not be able to give them back to us because they've lent them out. And that has led periodically to what used to be called, honestly, a bank panic. because people panicked, realizing that they might get to the bank and be told that their deposits could not be and might not ever be returned to them. In the face of this greedy behavior by banks, the government passed a law requiring reserves to be held by banks. The reserve requirement is that law. It says, for example, that for every dollar deposited in a bank, the bank has to keep 20 cents or 18 cents or some percentage in that neighborhood, which it cannot lend out, which it has to keep as a kind of insurance policy that in the event depositors want their money back, they will not be in a position of having to say no, causing a panic, causing the whole economy to totter and collapse. But what that means is every bank has a big bunch of money, the money that they are not allowed to lend out because of this insurance for depositors. And it's very tempting for a government that wants to stimulate the economy to lower the reserve requirement, basically telling every bank, you don't have to keep whatever we were telling you you had to, say 20%, we're lowering it to 15%, which means $5 for every 100 that you used to keep as a reserve, you are now free to lend. And the point of that is to get every bank to begin beating the bushes to get that money into the hands of interest-paying borrowers and thereby stimulate the economy. That's what China is doing, and a desperate Mr. Trump, worried about a recession between now and re-election time in November 2020, is trying to do everything he can, lower interest rates. He even proposed yesterday negative interest rates, but cutting reserve requirements is typically a more massive kind of stimulus because it isn't the government doing something, it's literally the government allowing every bank, large and small, to do that.
Now, we know that Donald Trump has borrowed over $1 billion, and from what little we have of his financials, it looks like he's sitting on between $300 and $400 million in loans just from Deutsche Bank right now. So if the interest rate, if the Fed fund rates go to zero from where they are right now, doesn't that mean that suddenly Donald Trump doesn't have to pay millions of dollars a year in interest?
Absolutely. He will do what we call refinance. He will borrow money at zero interest, or if he could really engineer this game, he could borrow at a negative interest rate, which means the bank pays him to be a borrower. That's what negative interest rates mean. He could borrow money at little or no interest, use it to pay off the loans he now has, which are carrying high interest, and it would be a big improvement for his finances and for everybody else who might do that. Of course, if you lower reserve requirements and you lower interest rates, you are inviting every speculator in the world to see an opportunity, because money is now so cheap to borrow, or if it goes to negative, banks will pay you to borrow, so any wild harebrained scheme you might have been playing with is now a more attractive opportunity than it even was before. So if we're worried that the kind of crash from irresponsible speculation that we had in 2008 is down the road, cutting interest rates, particularly to negative, and lowering reserve requirements only stimulates even more speculation and the inevitable bursting of that bubble down the road. But Mr. Trump and the Republicans clearly don't care. They are like King Louis XVI in France. They're going to do what's necessary, hope to get reelected, and then when the crash comes, we will hear them say, as Louis XVI did, after me comes the deluge, but meanwhile, I'm going to have the ride of my life.
Yeah, remarkable. Now, to those reserve requirements, so the banks are sitting on hundreds of billions of dollars in reserve.
That's right. That's right.
And there's this thing called proprietary trading, where the banks use, quote, their own money to gamble in the stock market. And, I understand that at various times we've had laws that say you can't use, and A, is when we say their own money, is that their profits that they're gambling, or are they gambling the reserve money, which is basically our money? And what's the, I know that the laws have changed on this numerous times since the 1920s. What has happened? How has it gone back and forth? Where are we at right now? We got about 2.5 minutes till we hit a hard break.
Okie doke. In the Great Depression, it was clear that one of the crazy things going on was that the banks were using the depositors' money to make all of these speculative investments. Again, remember, they profit if they make a good investment, and they have virtually no expense because we give them our deposits at little or nothing. So they're very tempted to make these speculative investments, and they did it with our money. One of the reforms that came out of the Great Depression was to create a wall. It was called the Glass-Steagall Act, and it basically said the bank cannot use depositors' money for speculative or long-term or risky investments. If the bank wants to do those investments, it either has to use the money of the people who started the bank, that's called the bank capital, or the accumulated profits, as you just mentioned, or the bank can go into the world of high finance and borrow money from investors, making it crystal clear and transparent that they are going to speculate with the investors' money, but not with the depositors' money. When Bill Clinton signed the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act in the 1990s, that wall of separation came down. Banks had been evading it for all the usual reasons, mainly to make more profits. We allow our monetary system to be controlled by people whose first priority is their own profit, and so they weaken the law, they evade the law, they amend the law, and with Mr. Clinton, they were able to basically repeal it. We are back to square one. Creative accounting allows banks to mix different kinds of money for all kinds of investments. That's what they have teams of lawyers, accountants, and economists like me to do, and they're always incentivized because in the capitalist system we live in, what they pay us for the money we give them is so much less than what they can get by speculating that they would have to be every day is Sunday in church kinds of people not to take advantage of that and thereby put the entire financial system at risk.
So where are we at right now? Are they speculating with their reserve funds?
Absolutely. They are taking unbelievable chances because it's virtually costless for them to do so. Wow. If they make a bad speculative investment, a really bad one, they declare bankruptcy. End of conversation. They are getting money from us. People who are listening to this program or watching it know they get our deposits for next to nothing. So it's cheap money, and they are incentivized to go out and try to make a killing with it, and that's what they're doing.
And this is what Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are going after them on, is it not?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a very, very dangerous thing that has upended our economy many times.
Amen. Professor Richard Wolff, democracyatwork.info, rdwolf.com. Thank you, Dr. Wolff.
Okie doke, glad to do so.
Great
Take
talking
care.
with you.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. It is 18 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. Let's see here. Patricia in Middletown, Virginia. Hey, Patricia, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today? Patricia? Oh, I've got her on hybrid too, Sean. I'm sorry. Patricia?
Yes.
Hey, you're on the air. What's up?
Well, I was just wondering about the, you may have already said something about the Social Security $130,000 cap on Social Security.
Yeah,
well, I mean, do they get Social Security?
Who's they?
I mean, are they allowed to draw?
You're talking about very, very rich people?
No, the $130,000. If they don't have to pay taxes, Social Security taxes at $130,000,
right?
Then do they get? Are they able to draw?
Yes, if somebody earns over $130,000 and they no longer pay Social Security taxes on their income over that $130,000. In other words, you pay income, you pay that 12.5% basically from zero up to $130,000. After $130,000, you pay nothing into Social Security. And yes, everybody in America qualifies for Social Security. Charles Koch is probably taking Social Security. And we want it that way, by the way, because the day that we start saying, no, wait a minute, only some people can get Social Security is the day it goes from being an entitlement program. In other words, it's everybody in America as a citizen of the United States is entitled to this benefit. It goes from being an entitlement program to being a welfare program. And you know what happens to welfare programs? Even Democrats cut them. Bill Clinton was famously proud of saying, we have ended welfare as we know it in the United States. So as soon as you start means testing something, that is saying, if means beyond a certain level, if you're very wealthy, you don't qualify for something. As soon as you start doing that, you are putting the entire program at risk.
Well, it brings back something. My grandma was born in 1898.
Wow.
And she, bless her heart, she never worked, but my granddaddy did. But he never worked on what they call public works. Mm-hmm. And so, guess how much money she got from Social Security?
I don't know.
When granddaddy died. $30 a month.
Well, back in the, 30s, 40s?
1970.
Oh, 1970. Wow, you couldn't live on $30 a month in 1970. That's...
kidding.
Yeah.
Because I remember her, it makes me cry. I remember her giving my dad $7 for a pair of shoes and said, "Is this enough?" And he said, "Yeah. That's enough."
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable, Patricia. The other thing that I've become real conscious of since I just went in and applied for Social Security myself, and I think next month I'm going to begin taking it. I've had a lot of real high income years in my life. I've had a lot of years where I made absolutely nothing for years at a time also as I was starting businesses. But once they got going, I had some pretty high incomes. And so I'm getting like close to $3,000 a month from Social Security. I know that, my mother-in-law is something like $800 a month. I think that's wrong. I don't think that Social Security payments should be based on how much you made during your life. I think everybody should be getting the same and that it should be a good, healthy amount.
I believe that.
Yeah. So we need to really rethink this.
I like $1,600.
Yeah.
And I worked many years.
There you go. Patricia, thank you. The Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. And let's see what time. Oh, yeah. But I wanted to just get a couple of other pieces of news in here before we before we get back to your phone calls, which we will do right after the break. Donald Trump just sent out this fundraising letter saying that here's what we expect to hear the Democrats debate tonight. Keep in mind, this went to people who have given money to Trump. I gave him $5 back during the Republican primary, and I've been on his list forever, or at least Fred Flintstone has. He says, here's the top things we expect to hear from the Democrats debate tonight. Banning plastic straws, destroying all fossil fuels, raising your taxes to pay for illegal criminals, light bulb ban, and no more cheeseburgers. See, this is the Fox News hysteria. Laura Ingraham had a piece of hamburger with a light bulb stuck in it, and she put a bunch of plastic straws in it and tried to sip it out of the straw as a stunt on television. Like, hey, let's own the libs. These people are stupid. Or let me rephrase that. Laura Ingraham and Donald Trump believe that Republican voters are stupid. The Republican voters really don't care about the future of their children. The Republican voters really don't care if the world lives or dies. That Republican voters, this is what they believe. And Trump is just laying this out in this fundraising email. Elizabeth Warren has proposed expanding Social Security. By the way, 70 to 17%. When you do the polling on this, should Social Security be expanded? Should we increase the amount that Social Security pays to people? 70% of Americans, including a majority of Republicans, a majority of independents, and obviously a majority of Democrats, 70% of Americans say, yes, you should expand Social Security. This is a no-brainer. Elizabeth Warren has rolled this out. Let's give everybody on Social Security a $200 raise tomorrow morning and pay for it by hitting people who earn over $250,000 a year with the same Social Security tax, or a slightly higher Social Security tax, actually, that all the rest of us pay. Let's just do this. And in fact, this is what Elizabeth Warren said. She said, when Republicans, politicians discuss the program, Social Security, it's mostly to debate about whether or not to cut benefits by a lot or a little. After signing a $1.5 trillion tax giveaway that primarily helped the rich and big corporations, Donald Trump twice proposed cutting billions from Social Security. And yes, that's true, although it largely was not reported by the media. This would reduce the senior poverty rate by 68% and lift an estimated 5 million seniors out of poverty, if Elizabeth Warren's plan gets passed into law. Amazing stuff. The debates tonight, what are you expecting?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Or even beyond that, what are you hoping to hear in the debates tonight? And what are you hoping not to hear? I'm hoping not to hear Democrats attack each other. I was reading this morning about Elizabeth Warren's new Social Security plan. She wants to basically give everybody on Social Security a $200 a week raise immediately, and extend that also to people on Social Security disability, and pay for it by eliminating the cap so that people see right now, if somebody earns over $130,000 a year, once they've made that much money, which for really rich people might be the first week of the year, they stop paying into the Social Security Trust Fund. They don't pay another penny. And so, an average person might pay 6% of their income, and their employer matches it with 6%. But a billionaire, they might pay, 1/100% into it, or a multimillionaire. So anyhow, raising the cap would do that. And it would lift 68% of the people who are in poverty, who are retired or disabled, out of poverty, and which is 5 million seniors. I mean, it's pretty mind-boggling when you think about it. So anyhow, I'm reading the newspapers this morning, and nowhere did I see 5 million seniors, 68% lifted out of poverty. Instead, it was it was more frequently characterized as, oh my God, rich people are going to freak out. This kind of news coverage is insane. And you are so fortunate to have Free Speech TV here. This television network where you actually learn what's going on. You know, the flagship, of course, is Amy Goodman. And then there's a bunch of us who are commenting about the news as well and talking about it. And you won't find that anywhere else. And if you want to keep it, if you want Free Speech TV to stay on the air, literally, you need to call now, 877-378-8669. Please call now. Yesterday was just a terrible day. We raised very little money. We need to make that up. Free Speech TV needs to keep going. They need your help. And so 877-378-8669 is the telephone number. And you can also go to freespeech.org. Free Speech TV is such an essential part of our media landscape. And the other thing that I'm really seriously asking you to do, whether you can contribute or not, is to make it to set as a personal mission to tell a couple of people, even 2 or 3. You know, odds are maybe out of every 5 or 6 people who hear about Free Speech TV, one of them will actually look it up and then get addicted, or find it useful. But I use that phrase, lovingly. But one of the most important things you can do is spread the word, right? We all need to become evangelists. So be an evangelist for Free Speech TV, whether you can make a contribution or not. This is the most important way that you can help out, in addition to calling right now and supporting this network at 877-378-8669. We have a set of gifts. These are all with one-time donations. If you make a $20 gift, you get a proud student of Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker. With a $50 gift, you get the Change the Channel Free Speech TV tote bag. With a $100 gift, you get the long sleeve shirt that says Any Functional Adult, which is kind of, like we have a dysfunctional adult in the White House right now. And frankly, I would say most of the Republican Party, tragically, but in any case, Any Functional Adult long sleeve t-shirt. With a $150 gift, you get a copy of my new book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, and it'll be autographed. With a $250 gift, we're going to get together and do an online discussion, kind of an off-the-record meet and greet, as it were. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Portland here, hang out with us. You can sit in the studio for the last hour of the show, and then we'll go down the street here and have lunch at a nice nearby restaurant. So those are the premiums. But really, I think most people take the premiums because, hey, that's cool. It's nice to have goodies. But the main reason people donate is because to Free Speech TV, whether it's a one-time gift or whether it's an ongoing and sustaining contribution or a one-year commitment or whatever it may be, is because of what Free Speech TV is offering. There's real content on this network. There's deep dive on this network. There's a perspective, a genuinely useful perspective, I think, on the news that is so lacking from the rest of the news coverage. I've been, as I said when I started, I'm reading this morning. I did about 3 hours of reading newspapers and whatnot before I came into the studio and we recorded this message to you today. And then, while I was doing that, I had the TV on, and almost universally the coverage was pablum. I mean, it was like, oh my God, are rich people going to be upset? Bloomberg says that, Elizabeth Warren wants to take billions away from the top 1%. Like, that's a bad thing? I mean, the top 1% have taken trillions of dollars out of the pockets of working people. Anyhow, 877-378-8669. Please call now. Thank you. Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air. or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com and you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
So what are you hoping to see or hear tonight, and what are you hoping not to, and where does all this go? And by the way, the House Judiciary Committee has approved guidelines for their impeachment inquiry. Things are going to start getting really, really interesting. And I think one of the things to keep in mind, and there's a great post by Ernest over on Democratic Underground about this, that some of the things that we're not considering, we make these Nixon-Trump comparisons. Nixon was a lame duck president. He was not running for re-election. Nixon's approval rating was 50% among Republicans in 1974. Trump's is 90%. So it's not going to be as easy as we may think or hope. But nonetheless, in my opinion, the crimes of this guy really need to be laid out. They need to be laid out explicitly and clearly. Anyhow, to your calls, Adam in New Orleans. Hey, Adam, what's up?
How you doing, Tom? Proud monthly contributor.
Thank you.
A question I've not heard addressed. The climate crisis proposals to date address half the problem. The crisis is going to destroy coastal cities with tens of millions displaced. Just reacting after the fact will result in avoidable death and misery. What's your plan to create new cities and expand existing cities when coastal cities are at high risk to go under?
Wow. That's a huge frame and a large question, and I would be surprised if any of the Democrats take that on, but it is something that we should be discussing. Because you're absolutely right. I mean, this is already happening in Miami Beach right now, and they've had to install millions and millions of dollars worth of pumps to pump water back out into the ocean. They're getting these so-called king tides. The streets are flooding on clear days where it hasn't rained just because of the tides, because the ocean is rising. And as Greenland melts, it's going to start rising a whole heck of a lot faster. Antarctica is now starting to melt too. It's happening more in the northern hemisphere than the southern, but excellent suggestion, Adam. Thank you very much. Varick in San Francisco. Hey, Varick, your thoughts?
Yeah, hey, Tom. Proud Thom Hartmann University student.
Thank you.
And I wanted to call today to clarify to you that I've heard you mention several times that Warren and Sanders are the only people running their campaigns.
No, when I say that, I say they're the only one among the top tier candidates. I know that there's a number of candidates who are polling under 3% who are also not taking money from corporations and billionaires.
Right. I'm not really concerned with those people. They're going to drop out of the race eventually.
I'm guessing
soon enough.
Unless one of them breaks through tonight or something happens. But yeah.
What I wanted to clarify, though, is it's being reported on other independent progressive channels, is that Warren actually took over $10 million that she had raised from large dollar donors for her senatorial race that she had left over and rolled that over into starting her presidential campaign, was therefore able to really ramp up her staffing and field offices in Iowa. Right. And so what I'm getting at is that I think that people need to understand that Bernie Sanders is the real, true progressive in the race, running off of small dollar donations. And when Warren says something like, I have a plan for that, I think she most likely got it from Bernie Sanders to begin with.
Well, Bernie was the guy who really blazed the trail here. There's no doubt about that. And he's been doing it for decades. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And with regard to Elizabeth Warren taking money from her, leftover money from her Senate campaign that may have come from high dollar donors, I don't know. I can't say that that's the case, Varick. I'm
That's
willing to
what's
take
being
your word
reported,
for it,
and,
but I would still like to double check it. But nonetheless, if that's the case, I think most of us who really care about climate change still drive cars, and most people who care about climate change still eat meat. There are very few of us who are perfect, and which is not to say that Bernie is or isn't. I don't want to make this about him, but I'm willing to cut a little bit of slack. But I'm very concerned about candidates who basically base their candidacy on their ability to walk into a room and where a fundraiser is being put on by a fossil fuel executive and it's at $100,000 a plate or whatever it may be. I have a problem with that. Varick, thanks for the call. Lynn in El Segundo, California, listening on KPFK. Hey, Lynn, what's up?
Hello?
Hey, you're on the air.
I wonder about the debate tonight, whether, like you, if they will attack each other or unify. And I'm particularly wondering if you think a Biden-Warren ticket might work to unite the party, because I have a friend who works with high-end clients, very wealthy. Unfortunately, they told him that if Bernie was the candidate, they would vote for Trump. And that concerns me quite a lot. So I'm concerned about unity in the party. Also, why did healthcare disappear from Elizabeth Warren's website? And finally, on socialism, I like Mike Gravel's response. He asked the question, what socialism? Republican socialism, which is for wealthy individuals and corporations and the military-industrial complex, which hurts everyday people, or democratic socialism, which benefits with public education and health.
That is brilliant. I'm going to have to steal that. With regard to a mixed ticket, I think that it's probably going to be absolutely necessary no matter who is the nominee, because the nominee is either going to be a, quote, centrist, somebody who takes corporate money, or a progressive, somebody who doesn't. And this was the big mistake that Hillary Clinton made, in my opinion, and the mistake that John Kennedy didn't make. Now, the issues were different back in 1960 when Kennedy was running. There was regional rather than ideological. But John Kennedy was a Northeastern liberal, and he put a Southern conservative, Lyndon Johnson, on the ticket. They hated each other. They were both in the Senate, and they, basically didn't even talk to each other. But Kennedy knew that Lyndon Johnson would balance the ticket and would get him votes that he couldn't get, would reach out to people he couldn't reach out to. So if Joe Biden, and this is why when Hillary Clinton won the nomination, I came on the air and said, please pick a solid progressive. It doesn't, if it was Bernie, there's no doubt in my mind she would have easily beat Trump. But even if it wasn't Bernie, if it had been a solid progressive that Hillary had picked, that would have brought out young people, that would have brought out climate activists, that would have brought out older people, boomers who are concerned about the fate and future of Social Security, the issues where Hillary was very, very weak. But instead, she picked Tim Kaine, who was another corporate Democrat, another so-called centrist. And that was the point at which a lot of the Democratic electorate said, screw it. Why should I be fighting for this? And I think that's the reason why she's not in the White House right now. So if Elizabeth Warren gets the ticket, gets the nomination, my personal, or Bernie Sanders for that matter, my personal, at this moment, thought is that probably the strongest candidate to put on the ticket with them that would balance the ticket, it would balance it ideologically, it would balance it racially, would be Kamala Harris, maybe Cory Booker. But on the other hand, Joe Biden gets the nomination. If he fails to put a true progressive, and Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, or there's other progressives out there in both the House and the Senate, Sherrod Brown. There's a bunch of them. If he fails to put a real progressive on the ticket, then I'm very concerned that it'll be simply a repeat of what we saw in 2016. David in St. Paul, Minnesota. Hey, David, what's on your mind? Thanks for listening to AM 950.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Tom. Hey, I just wanted, this goes back to Professor Wolf and the economics and the banks and everything. And I was just wondering if you had read the New York Times article on opportunity zones a week and a half or so ago.
I didn't.
And if not, just a summary of it was basically in the 2017 tax cut law, they put in provisions that.
Oh, yeah. And these, to help out poor neighborhoods. And these are being used by big developers to make themselves insanely rich.
These are, yes. And the poor developers are the Kushners, Anthony Scaramucci. Now they have these huge hedge fund meetings, conventions, and parties to raise funds for these things. And I'm just wondering, Tom, I had a discussion with another progressive radio host who said, well, even though these people are taking the opportunity to maximize their investments, it's still a good thing. And I'm just wondering how you feel about that. It needs.
I think they need to recalibrate them. I'm guessing that the law was written with these loopholes in it intentionally by people who were taking money from the banksters. Now that we see the consequences and it's obvious to everybody, they should go back and fix it. I mean, opportunity zones, in principle, I'm not opposed to. And it's a double whammy because they're taking the capital gains taxes away and making money off of those. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, David. Thanks a lot for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
There's a lot of these kind of laws that need to be rewritten, but instead what we've got is Donald Trump rewriting the clean water regulations to make our water more poisonous. And welcome back. We're going to be checking in with Bob Ney in a few minutes. Rudy in Atlanta. Hey, Rudy, thanks for watching Free Speech. What's on your mind?
And thanks for taking my call. Tom, tonight I don't want to hear a politician. We need someone that's going to not so much get in the mud, but have a little mud come out of their mouth. I mean, we need someone that's going to talk to someone and not be a politician. We need someone that's to probably drop an F-bomb or something. Because
you're talking about how Beto O'Rourke has been talking lately, and thank you for not dropping it on my air. But
right. I'm just saying, Tom, we have to get to the roots. We need a politician. We need a candidate that has enough. What's the word I want to use? That can be able to talk to both crowds at the same time.
Enough political flexibility, as it were. Yeah, go ahead, Rudy.
No, I'm just saying we have to be able to convey to everyone. We need someone to be able to talk to the poor person that doesn't have as much intellect when you're speaking to them, and not speak down to them. No one wants to feel like you're speaking in a condescending way. So what I'm saying is you have to be able to say what you need to say where everyone understands what's being said. And sometimes it gets nasty.
Yeah, the tough thing, given the last Republican primary, because the Democratic primary right now resembles the Republican field in as much as there's a lot of them. If you watch the Republican primary debates, all of the Republican candidates were very careful not to criticize each other, except for Donald Trump. Right. And Donald Trump ridiculed everybody, and Donald Trump ended up president. So there's a lot of pressure based on that history on the Democratic candidates to follow Trump's example and pick on each other. I'm just not sure that the Democratic electorate is the same as the Republican electorate. I think the Republican electorate, likes to watch worldwide wrestling, and the Democratic electorate would rather have a serious discussion on the issues. But I think the other thing that the Republicans did is every question was an opportunity to trash Hillary Clinton, and the presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party. And I think that every candidate needs to be very vigilant about using any question tonight as an opportunity to not just trash Donald Trump, but also trash, his entire administration and the Republican Party. Because, without all of his enablers in the House, the Senate, and within his administration, Trump would be nowhere. So, is that making sense, Rudy?
Talked about exactly. We need to be able to tell, someone needs to stand up and say, this is BS. These people are allowing Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is not operating by himself.
Yeah.
He's getting a lot of help. And we need someone to be mad. We need someone to sound frustrated. And Beto sounds like he's frustrated.
Yeah. Except he's focusing it all on guns. I mean, I'd like to see it a little more wide bore. But yeah, I'm with you. He's trying to rescue his candidacy, basically. He's going down in flames if he doesn't. And, we'll see where it goes. Rudy, thank you for the call. I'm with you. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. We're going to check in with Bob Ney with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world. Stick around. Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do, Ellen Ratner's book. On the line with us is Bob Ney, author of Sideswipe, former Ohio congressman. Are you calling in from Ohio today, Bob?
Yes, sir, Tom, from the great state of Ohio.
And from the Washington courthouse. So what's up?
Well, Tom, tonight, of course, we're watching what I'm sure you've been talking about today, which is the great debate, as I call it, because this is the first time that you've got Biden on stage, of course, with Sanders and Warren, Kamala Harris. Everybody is on stage at one time because it's narrowed down to 10.
Right.
And that's going to be fascinating to watch their approach. And we've got to assume, because the House Judiciary Committee today approved a resolution that outlines the rules and scope for impeachment inquiry into President Trump, so you can bet, of course, that's going to come up tonight as a question.
Yeah. Now, Bob, I have a question for you.
Yes, sure.
My understanding is that when Congress explicitly begins an impeachment inquiry, that their powers are expanded from Article 1 powers, they can subpoena and beg for information, to Article 3 powers, that's the judiciary. They basically can operate as a grand jury and compel testimony and compel the transmission to Congress of things like documents. This is what the U.S. v. Nixon case in 1974 was, where the Supreme Court forced Nixon to hand over the tapes. And that being the case, was the language in this morning's resolution that Jerry Nadler held the vote on enough so that there is enough of a parallel between his committee today and the Judiciary Committee in the House back in 1974 that he will be able to force the Trump administration to give them things that they're asking for, including Trump's tax returns, the way that Nixon was forced to do so back in the 70s? Or was it weak enough that there may be some dispute and it's going to have to go to the Supreme Court again?
Well, on this one, Tom, I'm not a constitutional expert, but this is going to allow Chairman Nadler, as chair of judiciary, this official resolution, the ability to say that certain hearings are impeachment hearings, and then they're going to designate hearings related to the probe, and they can make it a full committee, they can make it a subcommittee. It gives additional time for them to do questioning, and it does stipulate that the president's legal counsel is able to review and respond in writing to impeachment-related evidence only on Chairman Nadler's invitation, which is interesting because, yes, this is an additional step, obviously, because they're not going to be able to just sit there and argue, because the scope of this is to see, is there enough information that comes in of potential violations. And by the way, they're going to specifically look at the emoluments clause, whether the president's making money off of the office, hush money payments used to cover up alleged affairs, and obstruction of justice in the form of what happened with the Mueller report.
Right.
So what this does, to answer your question, to the best of my knowledge, the resolution formalizes the impeachment investigation, and that doesn't mean that anybody has to endorse impeachment or not. I was there during the Clinton impeachment. This begins the process. It's going to give Nadler more power, as chairman and the committee, more powers than they would ever have had in any regular investigation.
Now, during the Clinton impeachment, the Clinton administration turned over documents that the House Judiciary Committee asked for once they had declared an impeachment hearing. Had they not, what would it have happened? And what might?
Oh, there would have been the same thing if they don't hear. When it goes to official level of impeachment, Chairman Nadler is going to have because they're taking that official position and designating exactly this committee or subcommittee is for the purpose of impeachment inquiry, not the purpose of impeachment, but impeachment inquiry. It gives him the power technically to be able to get basically just about anything that they want. Now, anything that can be disputed in a court, but I would say it would be expedited to be decided if the president decides, well, I'm just not going to give it to you, because this is a different level of power with the Judiciary Committee.
As the Supreme Court did with U.S. v. Nixon. They turned that around really fast. Fascinating. Okay, and to what, now if the impeachment committee or the Judiciary Committee asks for, say, Trump's tax returns, and Trump says, no way, I'm not going to give them to you, period. And it goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, no, you have to turn them over. And Trump says, I'm still not going to do it. Then what happens?
Well, then, obviously, to answer that question, there has to be a move to impeach the president.
Right. That's basically the only penalty. Although the IRS could be forced to turn them over, but Trump is claiming that he has the authority to stop the IRS commissioner from doing that, right?
Well, he actually doesn't under these terms. I mean, again, impeachment has a wide level because you're taking the official step of impeachment. And what's going to happen? The media is going to catch the candidates. Do you support impeaching President Trump? That is really not the question. Do they support the inquiry into getting the facts and not being evaded by the president?
Right. Well, yeah, the press tries to turn everything into a damn horse race, a wrestling match. Right. It's bizarre. Bob, and so thank you for being part of the honest press, Bob. I do appreciate it. The whole story press. Bob Ney with Talk Media News. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
I was reading this morning about Elizabeth Warren's new Social Security plan. She wants to basically give everybody on Social Security a $200 a week raise immediately, and extend that also to people on Social Security disability, and pay for it by eliminating the cap so that people see right now if somebody earns over $130,000 a year, once they've made that much money, which for really rich people might be the first week of the year, they stop paying into the Social Security Trust Fund. They don't pay another penny. And so, you know, an average person might pay 6% of their income and their employer matches it with 6%. But a billionaire, they might pay, you know, 1/100% into it, you know, or a multimillionaire. So anyhow, raising the cap would do that. And it would lift 68% of the people who are in poverty, who are retired or disabled, out of poverty, and which is 5 million seniors. I mean, it's pretty mind-boggling when you think about it. So anyhow, I'm reading the newspapers this morning, and nowhere did I see 5 million seniors, 68% lifted out of poverty. Instead, it was it was more frequently characterized as, oh my God, rich people are going to freak out. This kind of news coverage is insane. And you are so fortunate to have Free Speech TV here. This television network where you actually learn what's going on. You know, the flagship, of course, is Amy Goodman. And then there's a bunch of us who are commenting about the news as well and talking about it. And you won't find that anywhere else. And if you want to keep it, if you want Free Speech TV to stay on the air, literally, you need to call now, 877-378-8669. Please call now. Yesterday was just a terrible day. We raised very little money. We need to make that up. This you know, Free Speech TV needs to keep going. They need your help. And so 877-378-8669 is the telephone number. And you can also go to freespeech.org. Free Speech TV is such an essential part of our media landscape. And the other thing that I'm really seriously asking you to do, whether you can contribute or not, is to make it to set as a personal mission to tell a couple of people, even 2 or 3. You know, odds are maybe out of every 5 or 6 people who hear about Free Speech TV, one of them will actually look it up and then get addicted, or you know, find it useful. But I use that phrase, you know, lovingly. But you know, one of the most important things you can do is spread the word, right? We all need to become evangelists. So be an evangelist for Free Speech TV, whether you can make a contribution or not. This is the most important way that you can help out, in addition to calling right now and supporting this network at 877-378-8669. We have a set of gifts. These are all with one-time donations. If you make a $20 gift, you get a proud student of Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker. With a $50 gift, you get the Change the Channel Free Speech TV tote bag. With a $100 gift, you get the long sleeve shirt that says Any Functional Adult, which is kind of, you know, like we have a dysfunctional adult in the White House right now. And frankly, I would say most of the Republican Party, tragically, but in any case, Any Functional Adult long sleeve t-shirt. With a $150 gift, you get a copy of my new book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, and it'll be autographed. With a $250 gift, we're going to get together and do an online discussion, kind of an off-the-record meet and greet, as it were. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Portland here, hang out with us. You can sit in the studio for the last hour of the show, and then we'll go down the street here and have lunch at a nice nearby restaurant. So those are the premiums. But really, you know, I think most people take the premiums because, hey, you know, that's cool. It's nice to have goodies. But the main reason people donate is because to Free Speech TV, you know, whether it's a one-time gift or whether it's an ongoing and sustaining contribution or a one-year commitment or whatever it may be, is because of what Free Speech TV is offering. There's real content on this network. There's deep dive on this network. There's a perspective, a genuinely useful perspective, I think, on the news that is so lacking from the rest of the news coverage. I've been, as I said when I started, I'm reading this morning. I did about 3 hours of reading newspapers and whatnot before I came into the studio and we recorded this message to you today. And then, while I was doing that, I had the TV on, and almost universally the coverage was pablum. I mean, it was like, oh my God, are rich people going to be upset? Bloomberg says that, Elizabeth Warren wants to take billions away from the top 1%. Like, that's a bad thing? I mean, the top 1% have taken trillions of dollars out of the pockets of working people. Anyhow, 877-378-8669. Please call now. Thank you. Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com and you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Thom Hartmann here with you. A lot going on in the world today. A lot going on. Well, tonight is the debate, first of all. And there's, a whole bunch of different ways that you can see the debate. I think it's going to be worthwhile. We just got a report from Bloomberg. This is basically both the New York Times and Bloomberg are reporting this. These are statistics coming out of the federal government. Donald Trump had said, you'll recall, that he was going to give Americans better health care at less expense, right, than Obamacare. He says it's going to be, Obamacare is going to be terminated. It's going to be replaced with something that's going to be terrific and a lot less expensive and much better coverage. We will come out with something that will be so good, so much less expensive, so much better. It'll be wonderful. We're going to take care of everybody. We're going to take care of everybody. This is what Donald Trump said on the campaign trail. And a lot of Republicans actually believed him and voted for him because they thought, oh, finally, I'm going to get health care that doesn't cost as much, like they do in Canada, where you pay, $100 a month and you get really good comprehensive health care that includes pretty much everything, with no deductibles. So how's that working out for you, Republicans? The biggest monthly rise in medical care costs in years was last month. The report reflected this is the core reading. The report reflected a 1.9% monthly rise. Now, is your paycheck going up 1.9% a month? An 18.6% annual increase in health insurance prices. So last year, 7.9% of Americans didn't have insurance. And this is almost entirely in red states that have refused to expand Medicaid. But last month, 7.9% of people did not have health insurance. Last year, this month, 12 months later, it's 8.5%. 27.5 million people, according to the Census Bureau, there's a new report just out from the Census Bureau, have no health insurance. By the way, this is the first time since the Affordable Care Act was passed back in 2010 that insured rates, the number of people insured, has declined, that more people are without health insurance. This is the first time since 2010 And it's because the Trump administration has made it harder for people to, they dialed back the advertising for the Affordable Care Act. They made it harder to, they basically broke the website. I mean, they've been sabotaging this plan all along. Elizabeth Warren has come out with a really aggressive plan with regard to Social Security. Basically, give everybody on Social Security right now a $200 a month raise and pay for it by having people who earn over $250,000 a year start paying Social Security taxes. Because right now, if you earn $250,000 a year, you pay tax, you pay Social Security tax in your first $130,000 a year, but after that, zero. And she's saying, no, tax those people. Gee, what a novel idea. It's like the Republican socialism for the rich, the socialism for wealthy billionaires and for big corporations. Let's replace that with a little socialism for the average person. Let's expand Social Security. This, by the way, is popular with the American public. A majority of Republicans, a majority of independents, and a majority of Democrats all support it. In fact, expanding Social Security is supported by 70% of Americans. Elizabeth Warren said when Republican politicians discuss the program, it's mostly a debate about whether to cut benefits by a little or a lot. After signing a $1.5 trillion tax giveaway that primarily helped the rich and big corporations, Donald Trump twice proposed cutting billions from Social Security. And that's true. It wasn't reported in the media very much, but it's true. And not only that, both of his budgets cut the funding for people who work at Social Security. So if you want to go in and meet with Social Security people or get them on the phone, expect a much longer wait than you would have had 5 or 10 years ago, because the Republicans keep cutting out the number of employees Social Security can have. So, that's pretty straightforward stuff. The top 0.1% now own more wealth in the United States than the bottom 80%. That was not the case as recently as 1997. But it has been the case since the Bush tax cuts and the Trump tax cuts. It's huge. The top 1% now own about 40% of all the wealth in America. And the bottom 80% have gone from having over 20% of the wealth back when Reagan came into office to about 12% of the wealth. So, we're basically just wiping out Americans. And Stuart Varney on Fox and Friends this morning trashing Elizabeth Warren. They're starting to get hysterical, these guys. Jim Cramer, oh my God, something needs to be done. All right. There's a new hoax. Actually, I'm going to get to that tomorrow. There's just a bunch of other stuff here in the news that I want to share with you and cover, and then we'll pick up your calls on what you're looking for or worried about in tonight's debates. What I'm looking for is for the Democrats to support each other, to have each other's backs, even when they disagree with each other on policy, and to say things like, well, we may disagree on how to get to universal health care, but we all agree that it's a valuable goal. Or we may disagree on how to get to fewer gun deaths, but we all agree that it's a desirable goal. I mean, speak about values rather than fighting about policy. This is something Mark Pocan has been saying on this program for a year now, and I finally figured out and understood, and I hope that the Democrats do tonight. This morning, Jerry Nadler, who's the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, congressman from New York State, passed by majority vote. It was totally partisan, right? All the Democrats voted for it, all the Republicans voted against it. Passed rules that have established this Judiciary Committee and allow the Judiciary Committee to create subcommittees and allow other committees in Congress to fall under the umbrella of the Judiciary Committee in the context of an impeachment hearing. When Congress did this back in 1974, it allowed them to force Richard Nixon to turn over the White House tapes, which was kind of Richard Nixon's equivalent of Donald Trump's tax returns. So, and the Supreme Court backed them up on that. So we'll see how this plays out. The Trump administration is still separating children from their parents aggressively. Most recently, this was a couple of days ago, a Bahamian family that fled the Bahamas had their 12-year-old daughter taken away from them and put into one of these kids in cages for-profit detention facilities. Her name is Katora Paul, and she was separated from her family. Her mother said, I thought losing my house was devastating, or having to relocate to a different island or country was devastating. But when I found out that they got her, my baby, I mean, there are no words. It was at that moment that I really lost everything. Gabe Ortiz writing about this over at Daily Kos if you want some more information. And Gabe also writing, if I'm sent back, I will die. Sick immigrants facing deportation testify before House Committee. Kudos and props to Rachel Maddow for turning this into a national issue. This is Stephen Miller brutality. He doesn't care if people live or die. He just wants a white America. He doesn't want any more people of color coming into this country. And, these are the last gasps of white supremacy and white nationalism. America has held the ideal. We certainly haven't practiced it. I'll be the first to acknowledge that. And in fact, we practiced the opposite of it during the first 70 years of our existence, arguably throughout our entire existence. But America has at least espoused or held to the ideal of a pluralistic society, that we are bound together not by our DNA, not by our ancestors, but by an ideal, an idea, by the ideals that were set forth by John Locke in laying out the foundation of the Enlightenment. That as the Declaration of Independence says, and again, it wasn't practiced, but they laid down this set of markers, and we have been slowly moving in that direction for 240 years, that all men and women are created equal and endowed, by their Creator with the inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So, let's get there, huh? Donald Trump has this morning, or actually yesterday afternoon, announced on Twitter that he was going to delay for 2 weeks imposing increased tariffs on Chinese goods worth $250 billion. I smell a rat. I think that what's going on here is that Donald Trump has created a drag on the market and the economy with his trade war with China, that he knew this would happen. I mean, it was entirely predictable. And that the reason that he didn't try to work this through Congress, in addition to the fact that, they probably wouldn't have gone along with it, because the Republicans generally are not protectionists. Republicans like the ability of a big corporation to offshore jobs to China. This was Ronald Reagan's idea. NAFTA was Ronald Reagan's idea. And it got finalized during the George H.W. Bush administration. Now, it was signed by Bill Clinton. He gets blamed for it, but it was Reagan and Bush who put the thing together. So Republicans generally like free trade. But in any case, I think that what Trump is up to here is damage the economy, weaken the economy, while making the point about China trade, which has traditionally been a Democratic talking point. Sherrod Brown's been talking about this forever. Bernie Sanders, for goodness sake, has been talking about this forever on this program. That we need to have essentially a protectionist trade policy. I totally agree with that. So this has been the Democratic position forever. The Republican position has been free trade is wonderful, it helps everybody. And this has pretty much always been the case. So I think that what Trump is doing by postponing the tariffs, and China now may be postponing, or has, I think they just announced that they're going to postpone their tariffs on some of their tariffs on U.S. goods as well, that he creates a crisis, it softens the stock market and the economy. And then sometime in the next 6 months, just in time for the election, he's going to work out a deal, in quotes, with China, which he's just going to back off a little bit. China will back off a little bit. The markets will rebound. The stock market will go up. Everybody will think, hey, good times, right? It's wonderful now. And that will help Donald Trump get reelected. That is how I'm seeing this thing played out. I think it's, to a large extent, a phony baloney thing to start with. Trump was supposed to increase existing tariffs on $250 billion, $250 trillion worth of goods, Chinese goods, to 25 to 30% on October 1st, 3 weeks from now, roughly. And now he said, well, we'll take it to October 15, according to his most recent tweet. I smell a rat. Anyhow, it's 18 minutes past the hour. A little bit more news after the break, and then we'll be picking up your phone calls and rolling on with our conversations about what might happen tonight and how it should and should not play out. So stick around. 18 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Helping you win the water cooler wars. I'm Thom Hartmann, fair and only slightly unbalanced. And welcome back. Gary in Huntington Heights, Illinois. Hey, Gary, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, Tom, it's Arlington Heights, but just a second.
Oh, Arlington Heights, I'm sorry.
Okay. In the debates tonight, I would like Bernie and Elizabeth Warren to clear up what they got hammered on in the second debate, and that is Medicare for All is going to eliminate private insurance. This is a misnomer and everything. You've also stated that you don't understand why the unions aren't backing Medicare for All.
Actually, I do understand why some of the unions don't back it. It's because they've gotten better than normal policies for their workers.
There's more to it than that.
Okay, go for it.
I've been a union man all my life, union steward for 26 years. Okay. The elimination of workman's comp would take away the incentive for employers to provide a safe workplace. If you keep that.
Wait a minute. Gary, you're saying that if I'm an employer, right? And for example, I remember back, we owned an ad agency in Atlanta back in the day, and Louise was essentially running the business, and I was running the sales, end of that company. And she hired a woman to answer the phones and be a receptionist, and a case of paper came in, which is heavy. And Louise said to the receptionist, "Please don't lift that," because she complained about having back pain. She lifted it anyway, and then the next day she went to a chiropractor, I believe it was, and claimed that her back was injured, got a certificate about this, and filed a workman's comp claim against us. When that happened, the insurance company told Louise that this was the third time this woman had done this in the last 10 years. Getting hired by somebody, intentionally injuring herself, essentially, and then claiming workman's comp for the maximum period that she could. I think it was 1.5 years at that time. So are you telling me that if I no longer pay workman's compensation insurance, that I'm going to suddenly stop saying to my employees, don't do something to injure yourself, or that I'm going to allow bare wires to hang out around the studio that could electrocute somebody?
But you have to look, and you're talking about white collar. Think about it as blue collar. Think about it as manufacturing. If the employer does not have a financial incentive to put those, via OSHA, whatever, put the guards on those machines so that...
Of course they do. They have the incentive that if they don't follow the rules, they get fined. They can even be shut down, number one. And number two, it's extraordinarily expensive to retrain employees if you injure or kill an employee. I mean, setting aside just the moral dimension of it.
With OSHA, that never happens, and the fines.
Yeah, but still, what you're arguing, Gary, is that my paying an insurance premium if I'm running a factory, my paying an insurance premium is going to alter my behavior with regard to my employees. I'm not buying that.
Absolutely.
I'm not buying
it.
It makes no sense.
If you aren't financially liable for a safe workplace,
but I am. I can be sued by my employees. Any employer could be sued by their employees if the employer creates an unsafe work environment. It knows that they are creating an unsafe work environment and somebody's injured. They're subject to all kinds of lawsuits, whether they have insurance or not. Gary, I'm call again and make a better argument, but that's not one that I'm buying. We'll be back. It's 22 minutes past the hour. Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com, and you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. 24 minutes past the hour. Okay, Donald Trump is demanding, he tweet yesterday saying, calling Fed Chair Jay Powell a bonehead and saying, reduce interest rates to zero. Right. Now, what would that do for Donald Trump? See, Donald Trump never says anything if he doesn't think there's something in it for him. Well, we know that Donald Trump has over $300 million worth of loans from Deutsche Bank right now. And I'm guessing that he's leveraged to over $1 billion. I'm guessing that Donald Trump doesn't really have any net worth, that he's entirely negative, and that's why he's fighting to keep his tax returns private. And, he's leveraged out the wazoo. But with that $340 million from Deutsche Bank, those are variable rate loans, which means that when interest rates go down, the amount of interest that Donald Trump has to pay, which is around $8 million a year right now on that $340 million in loans from Deutsche Bank, just the one that we know about, that $8 million a year becomes zero. Or Deutsche Bank would even have to start paying Donald Trump if he goes into negative interest rates. Bizarre. Okay, meanwhile, in North Carolina, in their 9th district, yesterday, Dan Bishop, the Republican, beat Dan McCready, the Democrat, for that seat. This was the seat, this was the case, this was the seat where the previous Republican who ran in 2018, the previous Republican who ran had hired a local guy who's been doing this for Republicans apparently for a long time, hired him to go around and collect absentee ballots, and if they were absentee ballots for Democrats, basically throw them away. If they were for Republicans, in they go. So you've got that going on in North Carolina, and I believe that the guy who was stealing the absentee ballots is being prosecuted, but not so much news about that. Meanwhile, in Texas, a woman by the name of Crystal Mason, African-American woman, had been sentenced to prison. She was for illegally voting. Why? Because she'd gone to prison before and she was a felon. She didn't know that she couldn't vote. In fact, the person at the polls, when she said, I'm a felon, but I'm out of jail now, this poll worker said, well, here's a provisional ballot, which she filled out, and on it says, I swear I'm not a felon, and she didn't check that box. But nonetheless, she was convicted of illegally voting and sentenced to 5 years in prison. This week, her lawyers are appealing this conviction in front of 3 Republican judges on the Texas Court of Appeals. This was from 3 years ago, this conviction. So black people go to prison for voting, quote, illegally. Everywhere else, not so much.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Oh, and according to a mind-boggling story in Politico, we found out where those stingrays around the White House were. You'll recall my talking about these years ago. I'll tell you about that after the break. I was reading this morning about Elizabeth Warren's new Social Security plan. She wants to basically give everybody on Social Security a $200 a week raise immediately, and extend that also to people on Social Security disability, and pay for it by eliminating the cap so that people see right now, if somebody earns over roughly $30,000 a year, once they've made that much money, which for really rich people might be the first week of the year, they stop paying into the Social Security Trust Fund. They don't pay another penny. And so, an average person might pay 6% of their income, and their employer matches it with 6%. But a billionaire, they might pay, 1/100% into it, or a multimillionaire. So anyhow, raising the cap would do that. And it would lift 68% of the people who are in poverty, who are retired or disabled, out of poverty, and which is 5 million seniors. I mean, it's pretty mind-boggling when you think about it. So anyhow, I'm reading the newspapers this morning, and nowhere did I see 5 million seniors, 68% lifted out of poverty. Instead, it was it was more frequently characterized as, oh my God, rich people are going to freak out. This kind of news coverage is insane. And you are so fortunate to have Free Speech TV here. This television network where you actually learn what's going on. You know, the flagship, of course, is Amy Goodman. And then there's a bunch of us who are commenting about the news as well and talking about it. And you won't find that anywhere else. And if you want to keep it, if you want Free Speech TV to stay on the air, literally, you need to call now, 877-378-8669. Please call now. Yesterday was just a terrible day. We raised very little money. We need to make that up. This Free Speech TV needs to keep going. They need your help. And so 877-378-8669 is the telephone number. And you can also go to freespeech.org. Free Speech TV is such an essential part of our media landscape. And the other thing that I'm really seriously asking you to do, whether you can contribute or not, is to make it to set as a personal mission to tell a couple of people, even 2 or 3. You know, odds are maybe out of every 5 or 6 people who hear about Free Speech TV, one of them will actually look it up and then get addicted, or find it useful. But I use that phrase, lovingly. But one of the most important things you can do is spread the word, right? We all need to become evangelists. So be an evangelist for Free Speech TV, whether you can make a contribution or not. This is the most important way that you can help out, in addition to calling right now and supporting this network at 877-378-8669. We have a set of gifts. These are all with one-time donations. If you make a $20 gift, you get a proud student of Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker. With a $50 gift, you get the Change the Channel Free Speech TV tote bag. With a $100 gift, you get the long sleeve shirt that says Any Functional Adult, which is kind of, like we have a dysfunctional adult in the White House right now. And frankly, I would say most of the Republican Party, tragically, but in any case, Any Functional Adult long sleeve t-shirt. With a $150 gift, you get a copy of my new book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, and it'll be autographed. With a $250 gift, we're going to get together and do an online discussion, kind of an off-the-record meet and greet, as it were. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Portland here, hang out with us. You can sit in the studio for the last hour of the show, and then we'll go down the street here and have lunch at a nice nearby restaurant. So those are the premiums. But really, I think most people take the premiums because, hey, that's cool. It's nice to have goodies. The main reason people donate is because to Free Speech TV, whether it's a one-time gift or whether it's an ongoing and sustaining contribution or a one-year commitment or whatever it may be, is because of what Free Speech TV is offering. There's real content on this network. There's deep dive on this network. There's a perspective, a genuinely useful perspective, I think, on the news that is so lacking from the rest of the news coverage. I've been, as I said when I started, I'm reading this morning. I did about 3 hours of reading newspapers and whatnot before I came into the studio and we recorded this message to you today. And then, while I was doing that, I had the TV on, and almost universally the coverage was pablum. I mean, it was like, oh my God, are rich people going to be upset? Bloomberg says that, Elizabeth Warren wants to take billions away from the top 1%. Like, that's a bad thing? I mean, the top 1% have taken trillions of dollars out of the pockets of working people. Anyhow, 877-378-8669. Please call now. Thank you. So every 5 years, the U.S. Department of Agriculture comes out with new guidelines, and we just put up a video over at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program that talks about how the Trump administration, in this insanely corrupt deal with the $100 billion industry of ultra-processed, high-sugar, high-salt, high-fat foods that is literally killing 700,000 Americans a year, has said, oh, we're going to change the guidelines so that these fast food, high-processed food companies can shovel their stuff into our school lunch programs, into our kids. We're going to change the guidelines so people aren't informed about the importance of, dialing back somewhat on meat and on salt and sugar and all these other things. It's nuts. You can check the whole thing out over at thomhartmann.com. Look for the video for our
Welcome back.
The supporters.
Wow.
A bunch of cool news out there. One is that this is science news. The Hubble Space Telescope can see exoplanets. These are planets on distant stars as opposed to planets in our own solar system. And they've found one. This is it's not much bigger than Earth. It's named K2-18b. It's 110 light years away from Earth. It's in the constellation Leo, and it lies in the habitable zone around its star, where liquid water could exist, and they've just found rain. It is raining on this planet. Woohoo! Amazing stuff. Now, if we can just survive as a species long enough to figure out, how to check it out. And the other piece of news, Ben Carson famously ordered a $31,000 dining room table for his office. I mean, how many offices have dining room tables to begin with? Maybe he's got a private dining room as part of his office. I don't know. But whatever it is, he ordered a $31,000 dining room table. And, some people got pretty bent out of shape about it. And so the Trump administration Housing and Urban Development Inspector General looked into the case. And the big breaking news over at the Washington Post right now is that, they didn't find anything wrong with that. So it's all good. Incredible, but true. Jill in Princeton, Minnesota. Hey, Jill, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I'd like our Democratic candidates to speak about civilization and how humans were 99% of the time before that, in the sense that once we realized that land was important, we became, how we say is civilized today.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a way, I believe, we could help to eradicate that idea of capitalism with humanism. And I mean, in my sense, I think cooperativism is the best way to help our planet. And really, it is what we need to do. If you look at...
So, Jill, can you boil it down to a sentence? You want the candidates tonight to talk about civilization, that we need to be more cooperative rather than more competitive? Is that your point?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. It took me a minute to understand it. Thank you. I agree. Kim in Locust Grove, Oklahoma. Hey, Kim, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. Hey, I just got back from a 3-day fact-finding mission to Brownsville, Texas, and the situation with the asylum seekers on the border.
Right.
And if that is not addressed in the debate, it needs to be. It's horrible. It's just horrible what's going on down there. And the whole administrative structure with the Border Patrol and everything, they opened up the asylum courts this morning for the people that are waiting to get asylum in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend of mine down there, her group trying to gain access to the courts to observe, to make sure that everything was going according to what it needed to,
Right. Copacetic, yeah.
Right. And they were denied access.
Of course.
And
the Trump administration is doing all this in secret.
Oh, yes. And it's not just people from Central America. I met a family from Russia and Zimbabwe, and met a young boy from Angola, 7 years old. And a week ago, he was reunited with his father after 15 months.
Wow. Amazing
and he was
stuff.
in detention in one of the detention facilities for 15 months. And we can't go into the detention facilities.
Yeah,
we have no idea.
You know, the idea that a country can protect its sovereignty by only allowing people into the country with permission, essentially, and only allowing people to work with permission is a reasonable idea. It's something that's practiced by every advanced democracy in the world. The idea that a country would enforce those laws without transparency and capriciously, doing this for this administration, that for another administration, that is just fundamentally wrong. So, Kim, thank you very much for pointing that out. That's, that's pretty terrible. Troy in West Richard, Washington. Hey, Troy, what's up?
It's West Richland, Tom, and I just wanted to, talk about the Andrew Yang's universal basic income proposal and the fact that not everybody's going to get $1,000 a month, and that it requires people on Social Security disability. In order to get the $1,000, you'd have to opt out of your disability.
Yikes.
You'd have to opt out of food stamp benefits if you were receiving those kind of benefits.
Why would he do that?
He doesn't clarify this position anywhere except for within the documentation that he has.
Are you sure that it's not that if you're making if you're getting $12,000 a year in additional income, you no longer qualify for some of those programs?
No, it doesn't make sense that you wouldn't choose to opt out of them if you were making more than that, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is that in order to get the $1,000 a month, you have to opt out of these social safety net programs.
Right.
But the problem with that is that inflation would destroy people like me who are on Social Security disability.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like Andrew needs to do a little tweaking if what you say is absolutely the case. This is the first I've heard of it, but it's interesting. We'll see, if it gets brought up tonight. Troy, thank you for the call. Pete in Sherman Oaks, California. Hey, Pete, what's up?
Hi. My main concern about the debates is if Biden were not to significantly drop in the polls and relative standing to the others, because I think he's the most dangerous thing as far as losing to Trump goes. If he were to be the ultimate candidate, I don't see him holding his own against Trump for various reasons, which I won't go into here because that's sort of more details. But my favorites are first Bernie and second Elizabeth Warren, and I think either of those would be a very formidable opponent against Trump, but I'm afraid that Biden wouldn't be. And unless he starts dropping significantly, I think we're all in trouble.
Yeah, okay. Your opinion is registered. We'll see. We'll see. John in Minneapolis. Hey, John, what's up?
Yeah, I wish that somehow they could make the point that the government can actually do very well in delivering a service without any private enterprise. There's this meme out there that, in Republican land, that, they do it much more efficiently, corporations and private industry, and that simply isn't true. Social Security is a good case in point, and I think what they'll do with Medicare or the Medicare option is I think they'll make it so expensive, and the profits of the private insurers will just go up, and people will then be complaining about how much money we're spending when the money isn't going to the people that it's meant to go to, the people that are receiving the care. And that's why it's cheaper every place else in the world, because they legislate out, private industry. Mostly, maybe they have, health, some delivery systems that are privatized, but mostly in every other country it's not done this way. And we can do it here, and that's just, BS. Spread by Fox News, by all of the media, actually, because they make a lot of money from these same insurance companies, and they will not allow us to talk about it in a rational way. We should be comparing it to what is done elsewhere. That's why it's cheaper by about half.
Yeah, I completely agree, John. And the original sales pitch that the Republicans made for Medicare only paying 80% of expenses, this was the price that LBJ had to pay in order to get Medicare passed. The Republicans were saying, if people don't have a little skin in the game, they're going to have an incentive to abuse the system. And so, somebody goes into their doctor, and a doctor visit is normally $25, which it was back in the 1960s. They should have to pay $4. There's nothing wrong with that. Or $5. There's nothing wrong with it. And this whole skin in the game thing has been proven repeatedly to be total BS. But really what it did, and I think the real reason why the Republicans wanted it in there, I don't think they believe their own BS about skin in the game, was that they wanted to create an opening for private for-profit health insurance companies to make money off Medicare. And then that got exploded in 2005 when George W. Bush and the Republicans rolled out Medicare Advantage and said, no, you can now, in addition to having a private health insurance company fill in the 20% that Medicare doesn't cover, you can now have a private insurance company cover all of your Medicare expenses, and we'll simply reimburse them, And I am with you, and I think that it's a crime, against the people of the United States, and I wish more people would wake up to this. John, you said it so well. Thank you for the call. We'll be right back. It's 45 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. The true people's media, the place where despair is not an option. Stick around. We'll be right back. We'll continue this conversation about what are you hoping for tonight? What are you worried about tonight? And how do you see this all playing out?
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls in just a moment. 45 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. Patsy in Yakima, Washington. Hey, Patsy, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to make a remark about the gentleman who had called, who was a union member, talking about losing health care.
Well, what he was saying was that if Medicare for All eliminates the need for workman's compensation, which is a very narrow kind of insurance that provides insurance and other benefits to people who've been injured on the job. If that goes away, then employers will not create they will create more dangerous workplaces. Back to you, Patsy.
Right, and I think that you are looking at this as an employer who does the right thing.
Right.
There are employers who don't, who will not take care of their employees, who if it wasn't for I'm a union member also, if it wasn't for our medical, I'm not sure what position my husband would have been when he got thrown off a ship hatch. Mm-hmm. And we had to use our private insurance to cover all the medical until the case got taken care of.
Right, but if you had Medicare for All, it would all be covered. Back when one of our kids, our oldest daughter, back when she was 17 or 18, Louise and I decided we were going to get a car for her. And, thank God we were in a position where we could afford to do that. And so I was looking around at used cars because we wanted to get a cheap car. And the car rental companies sell cars that are just 2 years old. They keep them for a year or two and then they sell them. And what we discovered was that the car rental companies' cars were a whole lot more beat up than other cars of the same age. And it wasn't just that they'd been driven more miles because they were continuously being rented. It was because people bought the insurance, and because they had the insurance, they didn't care if the car, if they went over a speed bump at 50 miles an hour or if they sideswiped a guardrail or whatever. They didn't care. They had the insurance. So I think you could build just as strong a case that right now, because employers have workman's comp, because they're required by law to have workman's comp, that they care a little less about their workplace because they know they've got a safety net.
Well, but at the same time, once that workman's comp is done, they controvert the case, and then you're relying on whatever you can get.
What does that mean?
I don't know. Well, when I was on the job, I saw a lot of people who shouldn't have been on the job, and because they were forced to go back to work because they couldn't afford not to.
Oh, because their workman's comp expired, you mean?
Right, and as soon as the workman's comp expired, then, the only thing they had for us in our union was that at least our medical was getting paid.
Right. But in a Medicare for all environment, if you are still in need of medical services, you get them as long as you need them. I mean, the other thing that you're bringing up, Patsy, is the fact that most jobs don't pay enough, and the economy has been restructured since the 1980s to perpetuate that, and that's clearly not a good thing that we need to do something about. But I don't see what that has to do with workman's comp.
Well, I guess because we had workman's comp, and we had the coverage while we were waiting for the workman's comp to get settled. And I guess I wasn't sure if that would get covered.
Oh, it would. Under Medicare for all, if you're sick, you go to the doctor, period. It's real easy. I mean, it's very straightforward stuff. Patty, I got to run.
Okay.
Here comes the music, but maybe I'm missing something here, and maybe somebody else will call up and correct
it. Maybe I am not explaining it properly.
It may well be. Hopefully I can figure this all out. Patsy, thank you for the call. I appreciate it, and a very considerate call as well. We'll be right back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. So there's a new paper out from Breakthrough, the National Center for Climate Program, at thomhartmann.com. For supporters of our program, that talks about how the Trump administration, in this insanely corrupt deal with the $100 billion industry of ultra-processed, high-sugar, high-salt, high-fat foods that is literally killing 700,000 Americans a year, has said, we're going to change the guidelines so that these fast food, high-processed food companies can shovel their stuff into our school lunch programs, into our kids. We're going to change the guidelines so people aren't informed about the importance of dialing back somewhat on meat and on salt and sugar and all these other things. It's nuts. You can check the whole thing out over at thomhartmann.com. Look for the video for our, the supporters of our program at thomhartmann.com. Oh my, welcome back. A lot to talk about here. Deborah in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Hey, Deborah, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hi, Tom.
Hey.
I just wanted to mention my situation, which goes along with what Elizabeth Warren is proposing, which would be so helpful to someone like me who is 67, still working on disability right now, with my not with my job,
right,
but my disability as far as my job is concerned. Once that is up, I will be out there to fend for myself, making $14,000 a year.
That's your Social Security benefit?
That would be my Social Security benefits.
Right.
And it's not like I've goofed off for, 40 years. There's never been a day that I have not had a job and have worked decent jobs.
Right.
So I don't think it should be looked at like welfare or socialism or anything like that. I mean, I know there's a lot more people out there like me that once they get to that point are not going to be able to afford to live.
Yeah, I agree. And I was saying earlier, Louise and I went down to the Social Security office last week or the week before last and signed up for Social Security. I mean, I had to do that a couple of years ago to get Medicare. But we finally thought, okay, let's go on Social Security. And I'm getting a lot of money from Social Security. In fact, it shocked me how much money I'm getting from Social Security. And it's because, as the owner of a bunch of businesses and I made a lot of money when I was a lot younger, I have this history of a high income. So I'm right at the top of the Social Security income, whereas my mother-in-law is making is taking home less than $1,000 a year. And that's the fate, I think, of a lot of women, particularly women who have a divorce where their husband remarried and his new wife ends up getting his Social Security benefits in those households where the husband was the breadwinner. It could reverse, obviously, in some cases. And I just think that's wrong. I don't think that we should be paying people Social Security benefits based on their lifetime income. I think that people should get Social Security based on what it costs to live, at a minimum baseline. And that way, if you've got savings, then, you can also, take a cruise or, whatever you want. But let's get this minimum baseline under control so that people who are retired can actually live. I mean, it's crazy.
That's so true. It just seems to me that it would give a boost to the economy as well.
Yeah, it would.
That would be a big help.
It would, because
to most people.
Yes, because 100% of that money gets spent immediately. I mean, for probably 90% of Social Security recipients. I mean, probably the Social Security money that Louise and I get is going to go right into a savings account. But because I'm still employed and I'm doing okay. But I just think that we should all have this safety so that people don't panic and freak out. I mean, 28% of seniors are living in poverty. That's crazy. Deborah, thank you for the call. Logan in Sonoma, California. Hey, Logan, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. So one of the things that has been coming up a little bit in Democratic Party circles is the idea of getting rid of the Electoral College. But I'd rather see Democrats argue that we haven't increased the number of electors or the number of representatives since 1976, and there were about 100 million less people in the country then. And it's really disenfranchised high-populated areas and led to decline of Democratic candidates. So I just think that rather than arguing getting rid of it, we should just argue that the system should work as it was intended. And it blocks from arguments that we're going against the Constitution or the Founding Fathers or any of that kind of stuff. It's just saying we want to keep this system, but it should be done appropriately. 5 of our first 6 presidents were slaveholders. And there is a strong argument to be made that, and in fact, I devote a chapter to a book I've got coming out next spring called The Hidden History of Voting, the War on Voting, the Republican War on Voting. There's an argument to be made that the Electoral College, in part, was put into place to protect the southern states, to protect the slaveholding states. And it worked that way for the first 6 presidencies, with the exception of John Adams. I just think that what we tend to do in the Democratic Party is add a lot of complexity, like what you're talking about right now, to our arguments. And the more we can simplify them, the more. No, but you said you want the Electoral College to go back to doing what it was intended to do. What it was intended to do, I think, and I think I can make a strong case for this, was to protect a minority, protect the slaveholding states, which actually had a minority of voting citizens in the United States. It was the 3/5 compromise that allowed them to dominate the Electoral College. It was all one thing, the 3/5 compromise and the Electoral College. It was literally all one thing. It was put into place to protect slavery, and we're living with it now. And I don't think that we need to protect slavery anymore, and we don't need to protect the small states. So anyhow, Logan, I guess we're going to have to agree to disagree. I appreciate your call, though. And thank you all for being with us today. Wow, another day flies by. It's incredible. Tomorrow it'll be Anything Goes Friday, and I'm sure we'll be discussing what happened in tonight's debates. So be sure to check them out. There's all kinds of ways to find them. Just poke around. And don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires you. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow. And watch tonight.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.